Welcome, 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 one and all, to yet another episode of WhickTV. It's a cross-ideological space where we come together to talk about issues both political and cultural, from the silly to the serious. Gang, we're going to be talking today about who has a better solution to crime, the right or the left. Recently, not so erudite, Kyla here, made a tweet and said this. She was quote tweeting a gentleman by the name of Gunther Eagleman, um, referencing the the Charlotte train murder of Arenia. I think I'm saying her name right. She says
Irina.
this: the right has zero solutions to this. By the way, paranoid, schizophrenic, violent outbursts require an integrated care system to ensure he has access to and is taking his medication. And they just defunded school lunches. They won't fund this. In response, Lactoid says the following: the right solution is to keep criminals locked up if they keep committing crime. 3 strikes laws, cash bail, tough sentences, low thresholds for felonies, proactive policing, etc. For this particular incident, any one of those proposals could have prevented this. Today, we're here to talk about it and we're here to discuss it. And I've got some great people to go on. We're going to give the mic first to Erudite, and then we're going to go around and let Ant-Man have the last word. Go ahead, Erudite, open us up. Tell people who you are, what you think, all that.
Yeah, I'm not so erudite. I mean, I feel like what I think is pretty decently like fleshed out within the Twitter post. I think that the right is going to be resistant to any solution. I think maybe I'll preempt. I don't want to get into squabbling about the word solution. When I say the word solution, what I mean specifically is an intervention that has good outcomes, right? So the final solution was definitely labeled a solution, but I don't actually think that it was. So this idea to me of just like locking people up indefinitely doesn't solve complicated issues that occur between the space of mental illness and substance abuse. And I think that by and large, most of the things that would address this, though not perfectly, but would address it, Republicans won't want to fund because they're the ones who defunded it before, and I don't see them in any near future wanting to fund it.
Okay, thank you for being here. We'll get into it as we go. Lactoid, please.
Yeah, I'm Lactoid. So I think the claim that either side has zero solution to violent crime or crime generally is silly. And that was kind of the main thing that I was pushing against in the tweet. The right not only has solutions, but they have effective evidence based solutions. The kind of plurality of the studies, a lot of them, consistently show that increasing law enforcement presence reduces crime, and increasing sentencing for crime also reduces crime, not only in terms of a deterrence effect, but also a incapacitation effect. If you keep people who commit crime locked away, they're not out with us committing crime. And to a lesser extent, this kind of scares potential criminals away from doing crime. So catching criminals and keeping them away from the rest of us does indeed reduce them doing crime to the rest of us. The left has a few ineffective proposals, or they have had some ineffective proposals, I suppose. The biggest one here being defund the police. And there's also some immoral positions, I think, that have been brought up, such as opposing self defense in certain circumstances. But I'm also going to say the left does have some effective solutions as well. And I think the main one here that I think Erudite's been talking about, at least on Twitter, and that I've seen the left wing talk about, is funding and addressing mental health. There are studies that show this is effective. I'm not going to deny that. However, the right wing also recognizes the importance of addressing mental health. In fact, Donald Trump has spoken on this a few times, addressing it just in a little bit different ways, right? There has been talk of bringing back the institutions, especially for the chronically homeless, kind of mentally ill psychos, specifically the kind that killed Irina. So overall, I think the right wing does have more effective solutions. I think that we can argue about the minutia as to which one's actually more effective. But this idea that the right has zero solutions to crime, I think is just like very hyperbolic and overstated.
Okay, well, thank you for being here. We'll get into it as we go. Soy Pill.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a different conversation in the context of just this case with the stabbing of this poor Ukrainian woman, and then also just in general across the country. I didn't have as much time as I wanted to research this, but from what I found, the idea that Dems are soft on crime is not really substantiated. I look at all the evidence, and it seems that crime and violent crime is at usually all-time lows as per, 30, 40 years. And actually, it turns out if you look at like Harvard studies and a few others, like there aren't really partisan policies that have direct, lasting effects. So the idea of blaming, like, well, this has a Democrat mayor, this has a Republican mayor, it's really not that borne out. It's really hard to pin crime and direct, violent crime on it's the Republicans' fault, it's the Democrats' fault. Obviously, I would cede, I think some of the like worst things that I've seen are something like maybe Democrats' softness on like theft in California and New York. But otherwise, when we really look at this case specifically, which is a mentally ill man who was locked up once for like a Class D felony in North Carolina for the about the same time that he should be because he committed the felony and served his time. It doesn't seem like any of those policies perceived or like pushed by the right wing is going to solve this. They say death penalty, they say lock him up longer. It doesn't really make sense to me when we're looking at this on the grand scale. I think what's kind of frustrating is we're looking at this and maybe Erudite's going to come in and say, hey, we need to fund more mental health things, and Lactoid will say, well, Donald Trump has lent some credence to that, but in reality what he's saying is that Democrat cities are lawless, warfare bound things that we must send the military into, and he's not really applying this based on any sort of statistic or data. So overall it doesn't seem like there's a super partisan solution, and especially when we're talking about defund the police, which is not a thing proposed by Democratic politicians. It's just a very frustrating conversation because I think most of the things and the solutions just aren't even being talked about by either side, and we've now framed this into a martial law debate. So,
Okay, well, thank you for being here, and hopefully the conversation isn't too frustrating, but we'll see. Okay. Next up, first time guest on my show, Based Ant-Man. Tell people who you are, why we should listen to you, and what your thoughts.
Yeah, based Ant-Man. I am an attorney. I practice appellate and post-conviction criminal work. I would say, well, first off, I'll just say that these opinions are mine and mine alone, and of course they are not legal advice. I have to say that because of my employer. I think what we're going to find, at least from my perspective, is that this is not a Republican and Democrat thing. And while on the national stage and for the federal level, there's a lot of back and forth, you will find at the state level and the county level that we have a lot of the interventions that have been proposed here or suggested work. Some of them don't, but we do have them, and there gets to be a point. I can say this having represented defendants who are multi-time clients of mine, that there gets to be a point where the safest place for them, for everybody else, is for them to be locked up. I don't want them on the streets, and I represent them. So that's my perspective.
Okay, let's get into it. If you have trouble getting a word in edgewise, or if you feel like the need to step in and you can't, just let me know. Send me a DM, raise your hand or something. We'll get into it. But with that, let's open it up. I guess the question to the right side of this panel, to Lactoid and Based Ant-Man, is what right-wing solution would have prevented this incident from occurring? Which one
Basewick, I was about to ask that.
So any of them could have, and that's the important kind of qualifier here. This guy, he was arrested, I think 14 times. He was convicted of a couple felonies shortly after getting out of prison on the burglary. It was like armed burglary charge. And if I'm misstating anything slightly, just give me a little bit of grace. I know that within a month of being released on that, he was also arrested on a violent assault of his sister. I think that, when you look at this guy, but really, I guess criminals generally, right? There's a reason I did a lot of research into the actual studies showing what works. And yeah, if there was police there, that could have helped prevent it. If this guy was locked up for a longer period of time, that could have helped prevent it. Kind of 3 strikes rules kind of fall into that because it's longer sentences for repeat offenders. This guy was a repeat offender. In terms of cash bail, I mean, that one's a little bit, and the research on that, or the studies on that one are a little bit more tit for tat. There are ones that are for it, and there's ones that are against it. So I'll just concede that cash bail is a little bit more mixed. There are some studies that shows that it does reduce recidivism while you're out on bail, though, and so it's by a few percentages, just to be clear. So it's possible that any one of these could have prevented this. Now, I also want to make the argument that if this guy had the mental health care of the Democrats' dreams, or even the far left's dreams, where everybody has their own psychologist or something, that's also not going to guaranteedly prevent this from happening. So the question is, well, in terms of an evidence-based solutions, what is the right proposing versus what is the left proposing? And all the ones that I listed out are things that the right is proposing that do reduce crime. So yes, more police officers do reduce crime. More sentencing does reduce crime. Like, these are empirical, statistical realities. You can look into it. I'm not wrong. I don't know how you can say that, hey, the right has no solution when they're supporting more police, when Donald Trump is implementing EOs, mandating federal funding for more police. When the criticism here is that the National Guard is going into areas and occupying these areas, yeah, I mean, you can say that's too far. Washington, D.C. has had its crime cut in half, right, including murders. So you're seeing a massive drop in crime associated with the presence of law enforcement, because that's what the evidence suggests happens, and that's what we're seeing happen right now.
I guess real
Yes.
quick. Oh, well, I just want to say, just in response to a couple things you said, that I mean, like, if you look at what the actual Democrat governor is proposing in this, and you could say this might be a reaction to the right-wing backlash, but he is proposing more cops. He is actually proposing getting rid of cashless bail, which I think you actually represented very well. There, it goes both ways, and whether or not it actually reduces crime or increases crime is kind of up in the air. But the idea that more police in this area would have stopped a mentally ill man from a random targeted stabbing of a random person, I think, is kind of the contention I have. I don't understand, if people are scared of doing crimes because there are police in the area, I think that makes perfect sense. Having a cop on every single subway car, on every single, possible place where someone could just do some crazy thing. And to be clear, this man was very mentally ill. He said, like, the materials in my body made me do it. And like, I think he was even going so far as to say afterwards, like, well, I would never do this. It was the materials that did it, which is why his mom tried to commit him after a lot of these felonies that he committed. It's interesting to me that, like, locking him up longer, or to say like 3 strikes thing would have been the thing that would have stopped him from doing this, when I don't think that's really the case when you look at someone this crazy. It just doesn't really resonate. But Erudite, you were going to say?
Yeah, I was basically going to say deterrence is like great, and I have no problem with deterrence at all. I've never been on the left that says like get rid of police. We were part of the left that said that that was stupid, and that's why basically none of these policies got implemented. The issue is that like deterrence is insufficient on somebody that's not grounded in reality at this moment. And it's also insufficient for all things, right? You can't just have a police in every alley, in every place at all times. Like, so is it an acute triage solution? Yeah, it is an acute triage solution. The issue is that, like, by and large, the policy that the left is advocating is long-term preventative type programs that will prevent this from happening in the future, right? So I'm not ever going to say no police. What I am going to say is, why exactly is it that Republicans don't want to fund community care centers or want to integrate mental health problem-solving courts into judicial trials when we have good evidence, for example, that things like drug courts are extremely effective at reducing recidivism, in some countries up to 40%. And so this is the thing that I take issue with, right, is it's typically comes down to a funding issue. People don't want to fund mental health, particularly Republicans, but it's the type of mental health substance abuse treatment facilities that are actually going to lead to long-term reductions in crime, because the idea of just locking somebody up until they're out of their window of crime isn't sufficient, particularly with somebody who's schizophrenic, because the window of crime is typically, as I'm sure, I forget your name, AC, Ant-Man, as I'm sure Ant-Man would probably knows this as well, being in criminal prosecutions, like the peak age for criminality is 15, right? And it tends to taper off after about 25. Okay, DeCarlos was older than that. That also doesn't solve any of these problems, just locking people up in perpetuity in systems that are already overcrowded.
So,
If I may.
yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead, Ant-Man, please.
So I come from a county that has all of the programs that I think the left would like. We have 2 drug courts, we have a mental health court, we have a veterans court. And I can tell you that in our county, Mr. Brown would not have been eligible for any of those programs given his armed robbery. And that's just the unfortunate reality, is that they are not for that level of person or the criminal convictions in the record. I spent some time last night trying to put together what his actual criminal record, his rap sheet is. That was not easy to do, but I can tell you there are about 3 places I see from what I've put together where he had opportunities for the state to step in, whether it was through the criminal system or through the mental health system, and it did not do so. He had multiple arrests as a juvenile, and as near as I can tell, every one of those cases was dismissed. I don't know what they were for, but they were dismissed. He then turns 18 in 2009, and by 2011, he has a felony larceny, which is theft. So he has a felony. 2013, 2014, he has an armed robbery and what appears to be what we would call terroristic threats, which would be a significant misdemeanor. He's released by September 2020. He should have, as near as I can tell from North Carolina's sentencing code, have been on a 9 or 12-month period of probation supervision, which would have provided services for him. He was arrested for property crimes and trespassing, which should have been a parole violation, which would have provided him with services. It seems nothing happened. Then by July of, let's see, let me look here. His mother obtained an involuntary commitment order. So he was involuntarily committed at some point under their Mental Health Procedures Act, whatever they call it in North Carolina. That could have given him involuntary inpatient mental health services for up to a year. He was then had police contact, which they apparently didn't think was significant enough, other than to refer him to resources. And then we get to the misuse of 911 in 2025, and then the murder. So we had opportunities to provide him with services, and we didn't do so. So
Why?
I don't know.
My understanding was the
They kept letting him
involuntary.
out.
My understanding was his mom trying to get the involuntary commitment failed because the resources weren't there. Either it was because of he didn't qualify, like you said, I don't know, or because they just weren't able to go through the system. It was too sluggish. I did not find that information, but it seems like attempting to get the resources was the right step, and it just didn't happen, which is why I would say at the very least for this case specifically, because like I said, I don't think it's a super partisan issue when you zoom out. I do agree with you, but at least for this case, the left's idea of we should have better funded mental health services that are more expedited and allow these people to get into these things, that didn't exist here. And I think that's probably one of the only things that would have stopped this, unless, and I do see solutions to the right that I don't agree with, that are, well, they should have just killed him, death penalty after the larceny, they should have locked him up longer, which, I mean, he fell into what was the bandwidth of a Class D felony for the larceny, and he served his time. I don't know if doubling that sentence or tripling that sentence would have stopped him from being a schizophrenic. So I guess for this case, it does seem like the funding would have been the difference, the delineator as to whether or not he actually got out and did this again.
Well, a part of these issues that we're pointing out that Ant-Man pointed out is that he couldn't access a lot of these like mental health courts because of his prior felony. Okay, well, where does that philosophy come from? Well, if you look into it, it's from tough on crime bills and tough on crime policies, because it's certainly not the left that's opposed to felons. As somebody in Canada in a very liberal area with a very liberal mental health policy, we worked with felons in drug court facilities all the time. So in fact, they can't access drug court, which is proven to reduce recidivism and increase treatment compliance. He can't access it because Republicans said, yeah, but he did a felony, so we need to get our vengeance. We gotta be tough on crime.
Just so I'm clear, I'm not saying that people who have been charged with felonies cannot access these treatment programs. Violent felonies, yes. I mean, I think that's one of the cutoffs. And
yeah, that's what I'm taking an issue with.
And you can call that tough on crime, but I mean, I think
that is where it's from. If you
think
look into
that's
the
a
bill origination, right, the origin of drug court language came from a specific mental health bill, and the tough on crime aspect, specifically isolating things like violent crime, was Republican driven. That was what was in the bill
I
for
guess
drug courts.
for my edification, Ant-Man, can you tell me, uh, first of all, do you support keeping violent offenders out of things like drug court and things like that? And whether you do or do not, can you give us the I guess the thought process about why that's the case?
Well, I mean, I think in general, the cutoff for a lot of diversionary type programs, and I'm speaking for my own state, so this may be different, but I think you'll find that if these states have these kind of programs, violent crime is a cutoff, and it always will be because there is an issue with, first off, you have to hold people accountable, and you do that through punishment, and that is jail sentences. And there's programming in jails to handle these kind of things. We have an entire state correctional institution in my state that is dedicated to the integrated care that you have concerns about, including secure facilities, step down facilities, and then release facilities that have mental health treatment for people with significant mental health issues. And yes, part of the deal is in sentencing is making sure the public is protected. So, yes, that's the cutoff because there are significant benefits to a defendant for drug court programs, wellness programs, mental health treatment programs, which, I mean, in our case, it can often mean reduced felonies to misdemeanors or misdemeanors get dismissed. And then you have somebody who doesn't have a record, and if they're violent, I mean, you don't want that.
Well,
Can I
Nobody
clarify
wants that.
something? I have to clarify something because what it seems like I think they might be interpreting what you're saying, Ant-Man, is that this, like, if you commit violent crimes, you're ineligible for like drug court or mental health court. But what he, and correct me if I'm wrong, but what that means is that drug court or mental health court, these are alternatives to like an actual court that would give you some kind of like prison sentence. It's not an alternative to, like, you can still get mental health treatment while incarcerated if you've been convicted of a violent crime. I'm not aware of any state that leaves, like, that doesn't allow you to get mental health services if you're incarcerated, even if that is due to a violent crime. And Trump does support involuntary commitment of people who are violent and mentally ill. This is something that there's been already been an executive order about it, and this is something that's already been supported. First of all, just to, so I'm correct, that is correct, Ant-Man, right? The conversation is not, oh, he was violent, so now he doesn't get mental health resources in jail.
Correct. Absolutely
Nobody
correct.
was responding to that. Nobody thought that that was what was happening, right? Nobody thinks that if you go to jail, you just don't get access to mental health issues. The problem is that when you look even at the mental health facilities that are available within jail, jail just doesn't seem to have very effective recidivism effects, particularly for things like substance abuse, probably due to the nature of the size and volume. It's not like I'm going to like knock all the practitioners that are trying to make it work. I think that unfortunately the jail system doesn't set up an environment where these types of like healing and recovery that we want to see take place actually to take place. And the idea that like the violent crime is the cutoff because of like some notion of like, well, they need a consequence. It's like, does somebody who's not violent not need a consequence? And how is having forced rehab not a consequence? Like what exactly are we even talking about here? When I think what we're talking about here is when we talk about the violent crime threshold, there's one logical caveat that should be included for treatment facilities with a violent offender, which is the safety of the staff and ensuring that that individual can't get away from the facility to go and do violent crime elsewhere, right? Other than that, if that can be guaranteed, other than that, at that point, it's more about like some sentiment towards justice or something like that that is tied to jail that cannot be sufficiently found within mandated treatment.
No, it's about one of the most effective, and this is what, like, one of the main drivers of the studies demonstrate on why incarceration is so effective at reducing crime, which it does, right? Like, prisons
Yeah, of
do
course.
reduce crime. One of the reasons is simply incapacitation. If you have somebody who's out committing violent crimes, it's not sufficient to put them in a mental health court or a drug court. I'm aware of at least the drug courts. My state has those. It's not sufficient to put them in these courts where they get out and then have to go in for treatment every once in a while. or like by some kind
That's
of
not how
specified
most of
order.
these drug courts work. Most of these drug courts have beds. They are live-in facilities. They have varying levels of security, right? I have worked at very high security lockups where there's basically no way in or out, and it's closer to a jail sentence. The difference is that they're not sentenced to amount of time in recovery. They are sentenced to when you are approved through recovery, you get released into the community, right? It's a rehab-oriented form of consequence. But there are also drug courts that go all the way to like outpatient for like less severe crimes. So there is a
Eru
whole
is
gambit
Canadian.
of drug court that is available between both high levels of security and low levels of security, right? The idea that they'll just be wandering around staying at home as a violent offender is not true with a lot of drug courts,
Well,
at least none of the
where
ones that I
was
worked
this?
at.
I mean,
Alberta.
that is true for our drug courts. Our drug courts are alternatives to incarceration. So every drug court is different. I understand that, but our drug courts are specifically for people as an alternative to some
Yeah, ours are
significant
too.
jail sentences.
Real quick, based
They
on,
come
I
to
think we're
court.
talking past each other real quick because on one hand, I think we can agree that in certain violent cases, the alternative should not be the drug court. It's, yeah, this person's violent and maybe shouldn't have access to this because they've committed some crime and they should go and be punished for this. But in the case we're talking about, he did go to jail for this. He did serve a sentence. And afterwards, they tried to get him some of this, not alternative treatment, but supplementary drug treatment, mental health treatment, and they weren't able to. And I don't know if that's specifically here because of this violent crime. I wasn't able to see why he was denied, but I think we're talking about two different things here. One is mental health as an alternative, a drug court as an alternative, but also as a supplementary thing that wasn't available and provided to this person once he did serve the sentence, which you, I think, want as the punishment.
Didn't you say that his mother tried to involuntarily commit him?
Yeah.
Sure. So this is not opposed by the right. Just as to the topic of this question, this is no
Who got rid of
involuntary commitments are
asylums?
not.
Who got rid of asylums?
Yeah, you can look
Reagan.
at Reagan. You can look
Reagan.
at the politics of the 1980s, and you're going to find a lot of differences between the politics of the 1980s and the politics of today's right. Reagan also massively expanded disability payments. There are just like distinct differences of opinion between the neocons of the 1980s and the populist Republicans of today. Trump is not opposed to involuntarily committing the mentally ill. In fact, there's been criticism
You
of
know
his
what he is
positions on
opposed to?
involuntarily committing
Funding community care
mentally ill.
programs. He is
Yes.
like, if he's not even
So,
going to fund
once
SNAP,
again,
well, that's a really,
hold on.
really, really no.
Let
Stop.
Erudite
That's
finish
an,
Neger's
Let
speech.
me
that's an
finish.
integral piece of this. No, because when you look at mental
the frustrating
health
thing.
courts,
This
no,
is the frustrating
I'm
thing.
sure it is
I started
frustrating.
my
I'm sure it is
intro, but I
frustrating. I'm
started
sure
my
it is.
intro.
Gang,
I started my intro by
Blackwood,
conceding.
please.
I was in the middle of talking, right?
I understand you both want to
Okay,
talk.
bro.
I get it, but we have to have a little bit of order. She has a point, then you can respond to her point as soon as she's done. So,
As soon as she's done in the middle of my point.
your point was like 5 minutes long. Okay.
Was it?
Conversation, not a monologue. We're not filibuster here. Okay, Erudite and then Lactoid. Please.
Ladies first. I'll let Lactoid finish his thought. And then
Okay,
I'll go.
fine. Whatever. I guess I'm just here as window dressing. Whatever. Okay. Lactoid, go ahead.
Have no
Yeah.
feelings. You can go.
Once again, Donald Trump and the right generally does not oppose involuntary commitment. In terms of other solutions the right's proposing, these absolutely can have an effect. The research consistently shows, yes, if the police are not only on the subways, but even police are around the subways, simply understanding the threat of authority can be sufficient on causing a deterrent effect. And yes, if he was in sentence for a longer period of time, factoring in his mental health conditions, he also may have not been out at the time of the murder. Like, these are things that could affect the potential of him to commit this crime. And I said, yes, mental health is like the one thing the left is proposing that actually is like empirically based. That is like the one thing. I started off my intro by saying this, but this was off of you saying the right had no good solutions.
Yeah, the modern day right is like a great example of some group that like we can't even trust them to extend like healthcare premiums. Why the fuck would we ever believe? So Reagan takes the deinstitutionalization movement and he just basically cuts it all off and refuses funding, even though Carter, the year before Reagan got into power, had made a mental health care system plan that was planning to both reduce asylum beds because there was genuine concerns about overcrowding and abuse, but also integrate that with counter funding for community care programs, because a lot of individuals that are in asylums aren't criminological, right? And so there are different ways to support different mentally ill people than just locking them up forever. And a lot of times people end up in the same location. The idea that Trump, who won't fund SNAP, who won't fund Medicaid, that we should believe that he's suddenly going to build now asylum centers that are funded sufficiently with staff that are trained sufficiently to run them ethically, and also have the integrated community care portion that is also necessary to see recidivism and stabilization of mental health. For example, if DeCarlos had been forced to stay on its anti-psychs, that probably would have solved most of our problems. And you need community care centers to do that. The idea that Trump will fund that is absurd to me. There isn't a world where, like, his entire past economic year, you're going to convince me that he's going to fund a new mental health program, particularly when most of his constituents, most of the pundits around him, are just calling for the death penalty and pretending that that actually solves the problem when it doesn't.
And real quick, I do want to build a slight bridge, if not, like, maybe let some credence to what you're saying, Lactoid. Like, in the executive order, in, what is it, Section 4, subsection B, it does say the Attorney General shall prioritize available funding to support the expansion of drug courts and mental health courts for individuals for which such diversion serves public safety. And so, obviously, he is signaling this in this EO of, like, well, obviously, I'm in support of this. I want more funding to this. But what Erudite's saying, which I really agree with, is the indication of all of this virtue signaling he said in the same way he's like, well, I support this community, or I support, this program and this distribution. But when we look at the actual actions taken by him, and it's not, let's fund SNAP more, let's fund things that reduce poverty, let's try to reduce crime. It's, hey, I'm going to say this thing because I know it appeases people, but in the end, I'm going to pass laws that ultimately do not fund these programs and, like, send the military in, which, I guess you could say is in short-term effective in certain cases, but I don't see this as the long-term solution that the left is looking for, even if he's saying the right words in certain cases.
Yeah, so I guess the first thing to say is I think this argument now, because I'm pointing to things that, not only things that he's saying, but also things that the right has generally supported, right? You have put this in the category of going out and locking up dangerous people. I do think the right wing has shown a willingness to fund this, or at least what they perceive to be violent, dangerous people. But if your argument now is just like, we can't trust Trump to do this, we can't. And by the way, I don't know if Trump is the entire right. I mean, yes, he is kind of the president, and he is like a right-wing president. But the studies that I'm referring to consistently show that the right wing generally are the ones to push more strongly for, like, more policing and sentencing, stuff like this. But if your argument now is just like, we can't trust Trump to like do this efficiently, I mean, this is kind of an unfalsifiable argument at this point. I would just say,
It's not
okay,
we're basing
unfalsifiable.
this off the history of the policies he's implemented and the right wing. And yeah, it's not the whole right wing, but if you look at the
And
way
the
that...
broad
Yeah, go ahead.
culture of the right. Like, look at all the punditry's commentary. Look at all the politicians, right? Look at the politicians, Republican politicians' commentary on Irina's killing, right? Like, they weren't saying, gosh, if only he had access to community care and medications. They're saying, put him to death. Like,
they're
that
saying lock
brings
him up.
Irina back. No, they're saying kill him.
Some of them are. I'm not going to deny that,
Most of
and we
them.
can talk about the death penalty in a second. A lot of the crazies on Twitter under your reply may have been, sure. There's a reason I didn't bring that up, though. There's a reason why I didn't bring that up in my response, though. Okay, what I'm talking about is I think that Donald Trump has shown a tremendous willingness to dramatically fund law enforcement that he finds to be a priority, specifically when it comes to ICE. And I think that when his track record of that does demonstrate a willingness to do so. I don't think that I don't share the same level of, like, doom pill of there's no way he could ever possibly do this. I think that if you sell this to him of, yeah, we should, like, find these people who are mentally ill or have, like, a consistent history of crime and, like, arrest them and keep them in prison for long sentences, I think he would do that. In fact, there's a different order
That's not
issued
what we're
by Pam
advocating
Bondi.
for, though.
There's a different. That's what the right. That's one of the solutions that the right is advocating for. That empirically
I'm
works.
rejecting these as solutions to the actual problem.
Okay, if the empirical evidence
Band-Aid.
demonstrates that it works, then what basis do you have to
Okay,
deny
if
it?
my boss hands me a big pile of paperwork and says, find a solution to this, and I take it all and I throw it in the trash, is my boss going to be happy with me?
No, because you're not doing the
No.
paperwork.
So when I say solution, I mean better outcomes long term, not just
Like
an
less
overall
crime?
overall better integrated mental health care, because that will actually prevent crime rather than sticking people in private institutions that are already overcrowded and just depriving them of rights. I don't think that
If
that's the better alternative, especially because your model relies on them doing the crimes in the first place.
Again, if the goal here is to reduce crime, okay, because I don't think that community care in of itself is the goal. I think the reason why you're advocating for community care is that you're trying to reduce crime, and this is simply one means to do so. If the goal is reducing crime and the solutions that I presented to you, things that are repeatedly and consistently supported by the American right wing, such as increased policing and increased sentence length,
I'm not
if these
concerned
if
about
these
gangs.
if these
I'm not concerned about
empirically,
gangs. I don't know if you
I'm not
noticed.
talking about gangs. I'm talking
Then I
about
don't know why we're
crime
talking about
generally.
deterrence when I am quote tweeting something
I'm
about a
talking about
schizophrenic.
incapacitation.
I'm talking about a schizophrenic man who was off of his meds that murdered a woman. I don't care about deterrence in this situation because we have no evidence that deterrence is effective for people not in touch with reality or people like in the midst of extreme withdrawal. We
No,
don't have evidence for this.
we do. Hold on, we do. There's like lesser deterrent effect, but yes, even people who are crazy have there's some level of deterrent effect when it comes to police officers being around. Like there's a reason why the guy who stabbed Irina left the scene quickly and shuffled in amongst other people. I'm not denying that he's crazy, but this idea that he's just a complete incoherent animal that has no understanding whatsoever of the world around him. That's not true. Yeah, he's got delusions and he's fucked up in a lot of ways. But that's just the deterrence angle. There's also the incapacitation angle, which
Yeah, just lock
research
them up forever.
which
Long time. Just hold them forever.
continuously demonstrates to be effective at reducing crime.
Well,
And you
Lachlan,
brought
I
up
think
private
the
prisons.
issue here.
You brought up private prisons, which you did again, which you did on Twitter. 8% of Americans, incarcerated Americans, are locked up in private prisons. 92% are in public prisons. If private prisons are not a major part of our criminal justice system comparatively. If you want to just get rid of that 8%, I'm actually somewhat on board with that. But that's again a very small percentage compared to 92%
The
public.
whole point was about it being overcrowded. Are the public prisons magically not overcrowded?
Ours are not.
You brought up private. I think there was obviously a point
What was
to
the
be made of
point?
specifying private. If there's 8%,
I just in general think that the way that you guys go about funding your prison systems is gross, which I'm calling private. If it's not correct, specifically the correct word, that's totally fine. I'll grant it to you. But the actual point that I'm talking about here is overcrowding.
okay,
13%. 13% of the people, hold on, in prison have in the last 30 days had met the threshold for severe mental illness. I don't know why we're going to pretend that prison is actually dealing with this situation. The idea that just locking people up for longer will magically solve this problem. Do you not think a 55-year-old schizophrenic can also do violence after getting out from 25 years? And do you not think that jail might be somewhat exacerbative for the symptoms that cause things like violence within schizophrenia? What do you think predicts paranoid schizophrenia specifically?
This is frustrating because I keep citing the research that demonstrates it's effective, and then you keep trying to intuit train why it wouldn't be effective when the empirical
because
evidence
it's not towards
demonstrates
the
the exact
goal
when
that
the
I am
empirical
concerned
evidence
with.
the empirical evidence
Because
if
you
your goal
say
is less
total,
your goal more or less crime.
Okay.
You're saying total crime go down. And I am saying there isn't good evidence that this actually long-term solves less crime occurring because your
Yes,
system relies on them doing crime in the first place.
Okay, I want to make sure some other people.
Okay, most crime, a lot of crime is done by repeat. No, a lot of crime is done by repeat offenders, and keeping them in prison for a longer period of time prevents them from reoffending.
I want.
Yeah, you want escalatory crime to lock them up forever. That'll solve crime. Genius.
Here, let me
for a longer period of time.
I want to hear from Ant-Man, then I want to hear from Soy Pill. I want to get them in here. Go ahead, Ant-Man, then go ahead, Soy Pill. I want to make sure everyone gets a chance. Go ahead.
Feel like I understand that there are people with significant mental health issues in the prison system. Based on my own experience, I don't deal with a lot of severe schizophrenics like Mr. Brown. That is a rarity for me. I just deal with criminals. They have criminality issues and they don't look at the world like the rest of us do. And that is just a harsh reality. It has very little to do with their mental health. Do they have mental health issues? Yes, definitely they have mental health issues, but it is not at the level at this particular case, which has obviously made the national news. By and large, a lot of them are just criminals, and they are repeat offenders who have significant costs to the community, to individuals. Remember, I'm a defense attorney. I'm telling you that there are victims who have significant damage in their lives. The victims, their families, for these types of criminals who repeat over and over again. Personally, I don't think they should be out. And I appreciate the notion that criminality can start at 15 and tapers off at 25. That's not my experience. It's more like it tapers off after 40. So while I don't think we should be putting people to death, I am anti-death penalty. If we have people who are violently assaulting people, violently robbing people, using guns and shooting them, I don't necessarily have a problem with very long prison sentences for that and very long supervision times after that as well, where if they don't do what they're supposed to do, which includes their mental health, we violate their parole and we put them back in where they do it.
So I think the issue here is lactoid. Obviously, the logic behind what you're saying, and I think the research too as well, is true insofar as you will get a short-term reduction in the crimes committed by potential repeat offenders if you lock them up longer. And just to like bring it to the more absurd like thing, like yeah, well, let's say we just killed everyone for every crime. That's going to reduce crime by a lot. If you look at like extreme examples by like Singapore or any of the other places with very draconian laws. So when the right is advocating for let's lock them up longer, I think the issue that Erudite and I are having is, okay, sure, you were preventing that criminal from committing crime until they come out again, but unless you're locking them all up for life the instant they do anything, for example, if they go longer, let's say the felony, I think he served 5 years for this felony robbery. Let's say he served 10 years. He's not going to suddenly not want to commit that crime when he comes out. Some people might be deterred. I think the problem is you don't see a huge reduction in recidivism rate, so the only actual solution is to lock them up for life, which I don't think you think is the best solution for a lot of these crimes. The problem is then, how do we prevent these things from happening? Because otherwise it's reliant on them already having done the crimes, which means we do need those better healthcare facilities. We do need better alternatives that are like, hey, how can we get ahead of this before they go and do something dangerous? Or if they have done something dangerous but haven't killed anyone, how can we make sure they have that mental health stuff? And that doesn't seem to be solved by just let's lock them up longer.
We are providing them with these services, though. At every level, we provide them with these services. So you can have an issue with the quality of the services, and I certainly have those issues as well. We provide all of these services. We have multiple programs in our state correctional institution. I have a client who just came out of his state correctional institution with 2 electrical certifications and an HVAC certification. So it's not like we don't have programs to get people back on their feet. That's just for job placement. It doesn't include mental health, state drug treatment courts, boot camps. We have multiple programs to deal with all of this stuff. This is not a left-right thing. I mean, at the federal level, I appreciate the argument. You have Donald Trump ranting and raving, and you have people on the left ranting and raving. At your county and your state level, you have a Republican-controlled Senate. You've had a mix of a Republican-controlled legislature, and we have a Democrat governor. And that's been the way it's been over the past several years, and they have all supported all of these programs, not only at the county level, but the state level.
Okay. I think I know why Lactoid and I are maybe missing each other and why we're talking around, which is that Lactoid is talking about crime, and I am talking about crazy people or substance abusers who do crime, which are not the same populations. We have to talk. Sorry, it's my tweet. That's what I'm talking about. I'm clearly quote tweeting a situation with schizophrenia. It sounds like in the room, I'm the only person who has actually worked with people with violent paranoid schizophrenia. But also on top of that, I just want to be really clear that the reason why I'm opposed to what you're saying, Lactoid, maybe you have worked with people with violent paranoid schizophrenia in the criminal system. The reason why I'm opposed to what you're saying is you're suggesting a band-aid solution that is exceptionally expensive and doesn't actually solve the crux of the problem, right? The crux of the problem being that in the 1980s, we saw the swap, right? It's talked a lot about in a whole bunch of criminological books, which is that as we expunged asylums for a multitude of reasons, we saw an explosion in prisoner populations. If you look at the data, for example, 68% of local jail inmates are dependent or abusing drugs. So we know that substance abuse is highly integrated into the criminological. We know that about 40% of inmates say that they were high on drugs at the time that they were doing crime. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's higher on some studies. So, what I'm talking about is having a system that doesn't just lock them away forever where they can't do drugs, and that the moment they get out, they immediately relapse and they immediately go back to doing crime. I'm talking about a system that addresses the core of the problem, which isn't crime. It's mental illness and substance abuse. If you want to talk about like psychopaths, which I've also worked in a group session facility with violent psychopaths, I'm willing to have a different type of conversation because genuinely I think 3 strikes is good. And I'm actually really open to a lot more of the draconian stuff that you're suggesting based on criminal psychological profile, right? Somebody who's psychopathic, for example, isn't respondent to things like drug court or mental health treatment. In fact, the only way mostly to get them to stop doing crime is to convince them that it's bad for them. And that's about all we have for these people. I don't want Ed Kempers running around. What I do want, though, is I think about the clients that I have worked with. I had a client that had the gang trio. She had kidnapped somebody, broken that person's back with violent assault, and she also had lots of drug trafficking crimes. As a result of drug court and being in a year in our inpatient facility, she got clean, she stabilized, she got her kids back, she got a job, she got education, and she hasn't relapsed since. That's the type of programming that I am talking about. And I do not believe Republicans have a solution for this. I don't think they have the beginning of an interest for this because they don't want to fund it. They want to fund acute solutions like yours, which are expensive and don't get to the heart of the actual problem.
What was she
All right, a
charged
couple.
with?
I'd like to address real quick. I'd like to address both
Uh,
Soypill and Eric's points.
Before you go,
Um,
though, just a housekeeping. I, too, have worked with psychopaths since I work with other streamers. Okay, they're all psychopaths. Anyway, that's all I want to say. And if you start getting out of hand, I will have to start using your shock collars, which I've installed on all of you. Okay, all
Wow,
right?
poignant
Not to
Wick.
justify
you were
breaking.
looking for a way to work that
Yeah,
in.
he was
We are.
teeing
Go
that
ahead,
one up. He was waiting.
He was
I just
waiting.
wanted
He just
to
had
get
that.
the
Just
current, in here, like get a few
Hassan.
likes from that crowd. Anyway, go ahead, Lactoid, please.
Sure. So, Soypill, when you're talking about killing people prevents 100% of recidivism, obviously that's like not a real solution, though. So it is a solution. It's one that I would disagree with, obviously, because as with any solution, you have to take a look at the cost and benefit, or the cost versus benefit analysis. And I would say that just like killing anybody for any kind of like initial crime, this is like a massive like cost, and the benefit doesn't simply the benefit of having that kind of society just isn't there to justify the
Right,
cost.
and I wasn't accusing you of proposing that, by the way, just to be clear. Like I was using it as an example of like, yeah.
Well, no, it was a reductio to like, well, Lactoid, if how can you argue, or where's your limit with arguing for increased sentencing when the maximal punishment that would achieve what you're looking for is obviously infeasible. But all government actions have some kind of cost associated with it. If we're talking about mental health treatment, this costs money. If we're talking about setting up these clinics, this costs money. If we're talking about sending people out to like make sure they're all taking their meds, this costs money. It takes effort. It takes a certain level of like specialization among like part of our society to do this. In the same way that, sure, yes, it also takes up resources. And by the way, all that stuff before also infringes upon people in certain ways. In the same, like maybe not to the same extent in every way, but incapacitation and having cops and shit, it's similar, right? You have to look at the cost benefit analysis. And I think that when the right proposes things like more police, when studies show that like for every dollar you spend on police, you get like $1.63 back in social benefits, or longer sentences to reduce crime. When studies show that like incapacitating people is a major cause of reduction of crime, and we're referring to like violent felonies, where to me, yeah, if you commit like if you like armed robbery on somebody, while you're also psycho, like while you also have like severe mental illness to the point where like, well, we're having some issues like reaching this person because they're delusional. Yeah, I think 10 years is more reasonable than 5. And in fact, I could be argued even more than that. Now, I know that you're arguing for, I guess, less than that and different kinds of treatment. The question here is, well, is a solution that works but I disagree with because I don't like the impact it's going to have by locking people up. The question is that a solution? And it is a solution, and I think it's a reasonable solution. And I think a lot of Americans, when they look at violent criminals, like what they're referring to when they're talking about like these people should be in prison, is they're sharing my intuition, which is there's no fucking reason why somebody who commits murder is out in 20 years. There's no reason why somebody who's like DUI and then smashes into 2 kids and kills them is in prison for a couple years. There's no reason why somebody who was arrested 14 times, including for multiple violent felonies and assaulting his sister, why he was able to just be on the subway, unchaperoned, unsupervised, while he was able just to be there and pull out a knife and stab somebody. That is the argument that's sort of coming out from, I think, the right wing right now, and I do think it's reasonable. And then very quickly,
can I
as
address
to
that before
Erudite,
you make the second point, though? Because I think the problem with what you're saying is, I didn't know if you believe that. I guess you do. I think that is the problem, where you're looking at something where we as a society have deemed, yeah, for killing someone, there are certain cases where you go to jail for the rest of your life. You are deemed incompatible with society. You should never be out. And that makes sense. And sometimes it's, hey, you killed someone and you're at fault. Maybe it was involuntary manslaughter. Maybe it was like a crime of passion. Maybe it was a heat of the moment thing. But after 20 years, we've determined that, yeah, you are no longer someone who should like now be locked up for the rest of your life. But now you're pointing at things like DUIs, which are awful, where these people, slam into a minivan, kill 5 people. But is the implication that then we should lock them up for life too, because like they're incapable of ever, rectifying that, going to
longer than they are.
Why
for
though?
longer than they are.
But why?
Why?
For longer. So first of all, DUI is a heavily recidivized crime. Firstly, secondly, there is again a deterrence effect that comes up with sentencing as well, a little bit less so than incapacitation. But these are two things that the right wing looks at and they says, hey, if the studies demonstrate that this does work in reducing crime, then I think we should do it. And what you're saying is, okay, yes, you're right. The studies show that it reduces crime, but I'm against it because like I hold some kind of value disagreement with locking somebody up for committing these kind of
I think you're
actions.
misunderstanding what we're
Who's
saying.
against that?
For a long period of time.
Who's against what you're saying? Nobody here is against deterrence, right? I think our deterrence system is pretty effective. What we're pointing to, Soypill and I, is saying deterrence seems insufficient for actually solving this problem. Because if it was sufficient, I don't know why suddenly 20 years versus 6 years would be more deterring. In fact, when you look at the studies, there isn't really more deterring effect. You would think capital punishment would be more deterring than 20 years in prison. But we also don't have super good evidence that it's more deterring than anything else. Probably just because our human brains are not super good at thinking about things like this. What we're talking about here is an off-ramp to ensure that the factors preceding the criminological behaviors are diminished and doing what we can cost effectively to reduce this. If DUIs are highly recidivized, which I believe that they are, I wonder why that is. My suspicion is it's drunks doing it all the time. So the question here is, can we stop them from being drunk all the time? Because if we stop them from being drunk all the time, reasonably, the DUIs would stop. And it doesn't seem obvious that going into jail over and over and over again stops an addict's brain. And we know this, right?
And
so
to be clear,
what we're
Erudite
talking
too,
about,
like obviously we both acknowledge if you locked up this DUI guy for 20 years, he would not be able to do another DUI for 20 years. But the problem is you're not preventing more DUIs from happening by doing that. You're not providing the mental health services out. No, from that one person you are, but the system is not working in a way such that other people who would then commit a DUI are thinking, well, I'm going to be locked up for 20 years, so I won't drunk drive, as if that's like the delimiting factor as to why a drunk would decide whether or not they might accidentally kill someone. Because like Erudite said, like these people are not familiar with like the sentencing length of laws here. Like, yeah.
No, hold on. So what you just said, I think, it's going to prevent that one person from doing it again over and over again.
Yes.
Yes. That's what I'm talking. Like that's one of the main benefits.
We're not disagreeing.
That's one of the main benefits. You're saying you're not disagreeing, but this is a solution, right?
But it's not. How do you stop other people from doing DUIs?
This is from the U.S. Sentencing Commission, right? Longer sentences over 120 months reduce recidivism by 20 to 30% compared to shorter sentences, 24 to 36 months, with rearrest rates dropping from 58 to 38% over 8 years. Effects stronger for violent offenders, suggesting both deterrence and incapacitation.
Is this for the same recidivism for the same people?
Amongst the same people, right?
Well, yeah, obviously wouldn't the recidivism be lower if they have less of a chance to commit the crime because you lock them up longer? Like, of course. Yes. Like, we're not disagreeing with that. That's the whole point.
Nobody's arguing with preventative justice. Nobody's arguing with deterrence.
Also, when they get out, you guys, you keep mixing up deterrence and incapacitation. So When I'm referring to incapacitation, I'm talking about the fact that they are in jail so they can't keep doing crime. That is what my tweet said. When people keep committing crime, like keeping them there.
Wait,
And
That's
no.
rehabilitative justice.
No, that's
Yep.
incapacitation. That is incapacitation.
I understand your
in-
rehab
in-
process
th-
is
th- this
locking
is-
them up
no,
and
no.
stealing their civil rights
No,
forever. What I'm
rehabilitation
saying to
is
you,
different. Rehabilitation is
what
different.
I'm
You're mixing it up.
I understand what you were saying.
Okay,
That's right.
okay.
Stop. I understand. When Guy locked up, he can't keep doing crime.
That is
I get it.
incapacitation.
Yes, I fucking understand. I've understood the whole time. The issue that I'm pointing out to you is number one, most importantly, that's expensive as fuck. Especially if rehabilitative programs could be significantly less long rather than 20 years in prison to just get him past the window of when he can see so that hopefully he can't drive by the time he gets out because he's too fucking old, rather than that system where we're paying for him to be in prison for all of these years, wasting our money because he can't handle his drinking. Force him into rehab facilities, make him do a 5-year rehab program. Most rehab programs are like 3 months. And 6 months is where we start seeing major impacts. I was in a program that was a year and a half. It had amazing significant results. Why the fuck wouldn't we take all the money of just locking him up for the next 25 years, rehabilitate the individual, and then get him back into society so he's contributing again to society? I don't know at all, other than what's the benefit of your system versus my system?
Okay,
And-
before you
and
respond,
can I clarify
before
something,
anyone
too?
else goes,
Oh, okay.
speaking of expensive, this is an expensive show to run, so I'm going to read some super chats. It's the top of the hour, and then we'll get it, and I'll let you guys respond.
That one was a little more
I-
natural, Wick. I'll give you that.
You're welcome. $5 from Old School to say, is not so erudite pushing the Reagan closed all the asylums myth? In truth, he had a minor role in what was a decades-long bipartisan movement.
No.
Okay.
I don't know, read history. It started with JFK, but his program was to close and then fund care centers. Then he got assassinated. Carter picked it up back in 1980, drafted a bill that got passed, and the moment Reagan came into House, he canceled that bill. He cut mental health funding by 25% and made it so that all of the funding that's federal for mental health stuff wasn't even earmarked for mental health anymore. So states just stopped using it for that. And he was very, very large in both governor of California and once he was president of being anti-asylum. He closed most of the asylums in California. He was like one of the major drivers behind that. And his presidency was also marked by this. You're just cooking on crack or something. I don't know what you're up to.
$20 from Audacity to say free Palestine, Slava Ukraine. Thank you for the $20. $5 from Cameraman 502 to say, as someone who ran a drug court, you need the threat of prison to ensure people stick with the program. Addicts can't be expected to volunteer.
Good thing that nobody disagrees with preventative justice.
$20 from Audacity to say, if Destiny goes to prison, the chance of him procuring more CSAM drops significantly. Thank you for the $20. $5 from Ultra Robocats. Cool name to say, is the lawyer who works under a Democratic governor surprised that the prison system led by Democrats actually attempts to reduce recidivism? Question mark.
Who's that?
I think it's for the lawyer.
Guess it's for me.
Or Lactoid.
I mean, we've had a
I think it was for
Republican.
him.
We've had a Republican-controlled Senate. We've had a mixed Republican-Democrat-controlled legislature. We've had a Democrat governor for the past several years. But for the past 20 years, we've had these programs in place. So that was, I guess, my original opening point was that when you get to the county and state level, this is not a left-right thing. We have a left style, in my opinion, we have a left style criminal justice system. We offer all of these services. We offer all of these programs. I think the primary complaint that we might have is it may be a funding issue and it may be a quality issue. But we offer all of that, and so my original point is that if people are still committing violent crimes, then it's time to start talking about locking them up longer. And that does keep them from committing crime.
Well, I guess my question to you would be, shouldn't we be delineating between the cause of the violent crime? Like, wouldn't it be worthwhile understanding which people are high in psychopathy but actually not abusing drugs versus those that seem to only do violent crimes around and associated with substance abuse? Like, is it worth delineating these things and offering separate treatment paradigms as a result, or rehabilitative paradigms?
And also just to clear up
We
that you identified correctly, no one's saying these programs don't exist. They're just, it's a quality and funding issue. Yeah.
and to answer Erudite's question, I mean, we number of assessments that we do, number of psychological measures we do, substance abuse measures we do. I mean, you can go on to I'm from Pennsylvania. You can go onto our state correctional institution website and look at all of the assessments, all of the programs we offer. We do all of this so that we can classify uh, inmates correctly. We do this at the county level. We do it at the state level so that we get them the services they need. So the problem you then have then, I think, on the left side is that when guys get out and commit more crimes, we've provided them with the services that you've asked for. So then what do we do with them?
And I think that that's like when you've gone through successful rehabilitative justice and you're still committing crimes, right? I think that that's worthy looking at. The issue that I'm pointing to is I am not actually satisfied in America that these rehabilitative programs are offered substantively enough, nor that they are funded sufficiently enough. I suspect, for example, that a lot of these programs probably have beds for like 3 to 6 months tops, if they're even inpatient at all, which I would have major concerns with, right? Like 6 months, I think, is insufficient. For like, especially if you're highly criminological and highly substance abusing, you need very intensive treatment, quite likely for quite a while. You look like you're about to say
Can I
something.
ask you a question about your
Yeah.
DUI hypothetical? You suggested that longer treatment is where you start seeing progress for substance abuse,
Post 6
at
months.
least related to the DUI. So most of our first-time offender DUIs, first off, most of them go through a diversionary program and they get accepted. Even then, our first offense actual criminal DUIs have a very short sentence measured in hours, and then they're on probation for 6 months. Would you be suggesting that we should have longer treatment programs and thus longer probationary sentences in order to have successful DUI on a first offense for
Potentially,
substance abuse?
First of all, I'd want to be doing a program audit of like what actually is being offered in program. After that, like I don't know Pennsylvania's protocol is all I'm saying. After that, I would be interested in much more proactive patrol officer inclusion. The patrol officer inclusion in Alberta typically starts at the very beginning of drug court, the moment that they're in the inpatient, the patrol officer is coming and building connection and rapport. That way, when they transition out, they still have that rapport with the patrol officer. They understand where they've been and where they're going. And then I would also be looking at the integration from the, say they're at a 6-month treatment facility inpatient to community. What are the actual community access that they have? Do they have access to like affordable housing? Do they have access to housing specifically that's away from areas where they were high substance abusing before? Do they have patrol officers that they can get into contact with easily that understands them? Do they have mental health care practitioners that don't have, 3 to 6 month wait lists for like pretty unsatisfying sessions? I would be curious about answering all these questions. My guess is all of these things at wait times alone for like a therapist, even if it's provided by state, is probably very large, because most people I talk to, at least in America, have really insane wait times. Canada's quite bad as well, but my understanding is you just have more population.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about the specific solutions being proposed not 20 years ago, 30 years ago, but today by the right and left. And this is a question to those on the left side of the spectrum, so soy pill and erudite, and then I'll be asking a similar question to those on the right. What specific policy proposals have you seen by Democrats or by those on the left that you think will be more effective in reducing crime than the things that are being proposed by the right currently?
Yeah, sure, I can answer. Federal funding for mental health care that is earmarked specifically for mental health care that is transitioning out of like judicial systems. Asylums, just increasing the bed count. There is not enough of a bed count. You need way more beds in mental hospitals. There needs to be people that can be there for longer, and they also, by and large, for the bed count, they will need more staffing and probably more facilities physically built. We probably need to change the threshold for dangerous enough. Typically, the threshold is so astronomically high. At least I know in Canada, most states that I've been able to pull from, it looks like the bar for threshold is also very high for involuntary commitment. It probably needs to be lowered a little bit. I don't know exactly which measure each state is using, but it definitely needs to be lowered than where it is, because if the person, a lot of times, like when we would try to involuntary commit people out of like our outpatient care facility, we would have clients who were talking about going and like doing violent assault or theft or something like that, and we're talking about killing themselves or harming their children. We would report them, and so long as a social worker talked to them and they're like, no, I'm definitely not planning to do that, it was almost impossible to Baker's Act, because it was like an adult versus an adult's word. So we need lower thresholds for non-voluntary commitment, and I believe one of the policies that is in Irina's law in North Carolina is specifically that if you have any non-voluntary commitment in the last 3 years, when you show up to court for a charge, you are forced to get a mental health evaluation before you can ever be considered for release. And I think that would be a good thing to do too.
Yeah, just to add on to that, I mean, the general, not cop-out, but less specific answer is that I think if we had better mental health care, if not some sort of Medicare for all thing, you'd see a lot of this not happen nearly so much. But when it comes to specifically criminal court, I was going to talk about Iranian's law as well. Although I don't love everything about it, it also wants to expedite appeals for the death sentence. It also wants to get rid of casual bail, which I don't necessarily agree with. But yeah, parts of that I think are perfectly reasonable. I think the other thing was the GPS monitoring of people to make sure they're not like, yeah, if you're going to just say, well, I'll definitely show up, like at least have some way to make sure they're actually going to do that, or track that when they're not following those laws. But yeah, in general, just more funding to these programs.
Okay. Any comments from the right side on that? And if not, I'm going to ask you the same question: what specific policy proposals by Trump or the Trump administration, or that you've seen locally by right-wing legislators or governors, that you feel is more effective, I guess, than what the left is advocating for? Go ahead.
Sure. So I guess something that was said that I actually believe to be a right-wing position is lowering the threshold for involuntary commitment. This is something that Trump has proposed, and Republicans generally propose, that's been criticized, especially by a lot of people who are concerned about like the kind of disparate racial impact it could potentially have on the sort of, especially from like the ACLU and other organizations, about sort of like kind of treating somebody as a criminal just if they have some kind of mental health issues. So the right wing position is lowering thresholds for involuntary commitment and just putting people in, like confining people and taking people, sometimes against their will, just if they're deemed to be some kind of danger to themselves or others. Um, I and then just broadly, then as to the right, something that Trump has proposed, something the Republicans in almost every state propose, basically every time they come for election, they do push harder for these. Not to say the Democrats are like all like anti-cop, um, but Republicans do tend to have like a more pro-cop position, which is pushing to hire more law enforcement. That's subsidized through federal funding through Trump, the DOJ with Pam Bondi, hiring more federal prosecutors, longer sentencing for violent crimes. And if you commit a violent crime and you're not like, we're concerned that you're not rehabilitated because you're, muttering to yourself that you're Jesus and that you're going to kill people, maybe don't let you out just because, hey, right, this 5 years, it's unfair. So, I mean, these are, and then, 3-strike laws, which really kind of goes in line with longer sentencing. Just again, the concept of incapacitation and deterrence, right? You want to dissuade people from doing crime by proving that there is a real penalty to doing so, but then also incapacitate them because of tremendous amounts of the crime in this country. I want to say most, but I'm not confident enough to say that. But a tremendous amounts of the crime in this country is done by repeat offenders. And simply keeping, like, I think a third of all, like, low-level crime, shoplifting, like a third of all shoplifting in New York is done by like 320 individuals, right? In a city of like 11 million or 12 million people. Like tremendous amounts of crime in this country are done by very, very small numbers of people. And that's one of the reasons why the research shows that just keeping them locked away from the rest of us is so effective on like reducing crime as a total percentage for the whole country. Because you only got to target a very small percentage of people. You only got to get people locked, a very small percentage of Americans locked away to have a tremendous effect on reducing overall crime.
Anything from you, Based Ant-Man?
I think I would probably support more pretrial services. I know we have them in my state, and I think they're pretty effective. So we actually let people out on what we call unsecured bail, which just means we set an amount, but they don't have to post anything. But then we secure that bail by requiring them to meet with probation officers or a supervised bail officer regularly while they're pretrial. We also do GPS. The only problem with GPS is that the defendant has to pay for it usually, and it's expensive. So I would probably support some funding for that because that obviously keeps the poor from getting out if GPS is required. So I mean, I think on a much like more local level, I think if you want to see significant changes, I think that's where you need to start. And then those pretrial services obviously help once you get to court. Because if people do what they're supposed to do in those pretrial services, we will often cut them a break. Now, I'm not talking about violent offenders, obviously, but I am talking about DUI and drug abuse and that kind of stuff. So, and that provides them additional time to get the services that Erudite has indicated she feels needs to be longer than maybe what a first-time offender is required to do. So.
I think a big problem I have, and I was going to address this before we got into the super chats, is in terms of longer sentencing. And I bring up the death penalty here because obviously that's like the worst thing that most people could perceive as that could happen to them. They'll kill me if I get caught for this. If you look at the death penalty in places that implement the death penalty, you don't see a significant reduction in the crimes that they would otherwise punish it for it, because the people who would otherwise be disincentivized because they'd be locked up for 20 years, 25 years, 30 years are pretty much just as incentivized as to not do it because they would be killed for it. And so when you lock up these people longer, obviously, again, we're not disagreeing with this. If you take the people that are repeat offenders that would repeat as soon as they get out and lock them up for longer periods of times, 20, 30, 40, for life, obviously they will not be able to commit those crimes again. The problem is this is not enough of a disincentive for the people that would otherwise now do those crimes. The people that start and do their first DUI are not thinking, it doesn't matter to them. They know it's possible they could kill themselves, they could kill others in their car while drunk, but the length of the sentencing doesn't seem to prevent them from doing it. And then even 5 years in jail, which is low, 3 years in jail is low for killing someone, but even then, that is 3 to 5 years of your life. That is not something that you just kind of brush off. And after that, they go back and do it again. It's not because the sentencing wasn't long enough necessarily. I really do think this is because these people don't get the treatment that they need. And so that's why we're really focused on how do we stop this before it happens, not how do we take the people that are already doing the crimes and keeping them from doing more crimes, which obviously we agree is a good thing.
Yeah, I think, and maybe I'm doing a poor job at explaining this, but like murder is most oftentimes not somebody's first crime. Most of the time for these like very serious offenses, this was also the case with Irene, with the guy who killed her. But in most cases, the people who commit murder, there is a long history there. There's a long history of violence. There's a long history of crime preceding it coming up to that spot, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, occasionally you get your like, oh shit, he was my kind neighbor for 50 years. I had no reason to suspect that. And you're always going to have that. There's that's going to be tough. And especially because, if they're not indicating that they are killers, like they're probably not going to be seeking any kind of mental health care, even if it's available anyway. But for most of the time, they have a long criminal history. And so the argument is, well, with people with this long criminal history, it's only a matter of time before they kill somebody or they do something else again. And if we keep them locked up, even if it's only for 10 years, there's two factors here. The first factor is, at the very least, they're not out committing crime for 10 years. This is going to have a statistically significant effect on America, which it does. And the other element is, as you pointed out, like there is an aging out period. There is a period in which like you get over, like as you get older, you become both physically and mentally less capable of doing crime. So both of these are, again, solutions.
Why don't you just arrest first-time offenders when they're like 18 and 19 and just no matter what crime they do, if it's got any, escalatory nature, whether it's like larceny and maybe assault or something like that, just hold them for 10 years. So they're 29 by the time they're getting out. Again, but just checked, most of the data says that most of the crime is done between the ages of 18 to 25. There are long-term, lifelong criminals, and these are different individuals. But maybe we can do that. The issue that I will go back to here is number one, right? DeCarlos Brown Jr., rather than just holding him in prison for 20 years, it is possible that it would be less expensive to have integrated community care and access to medication, probably for free, that would have prevented this for less of a cost to society and potentially have made him more of an asset to society as well. This idea where we like just lock them up for a really long time. It's like, that's not really a solution with the overpopulation and overcrowding in jails and also the expensiveness that jails are to the taxpayer, particularly if there are other alternatives that are more cost effective long term to prevent recidivism and in fact maybe even make that person contributing to society. And that's the model that I'm advocating for. I don't want to just like lock them up and get rid of them. That's
So the
not,
first,
it's not an
right.
answer.
The hypothetical you brought up is like, or why don't we just take 18-year-olds that commit a crime and just lock them up until they're like 30 or something, or over 25? It's simply a variation of the question that Soypil asked me earlier. Well, why don't you just take somebody who like commits crime and kill them? It's a little bit less of an extreme one for sure, but my answer to it is exactly the same, which is there's a cost benefit analysis whenever you do punishment, right? The question is not, well, we could just like vaporize anybody who like shoplifts. That's not what we're saying. We're saying we think that you guys have gone too far the other way. We think that this idea that you can get arrested 14 times and have all these felonies and assault people and have known mental illness while having crimes committed in the past, the fact that you were able to be on a subway is like demonstrable of a problem. Like that's not okay. And it's not okay that people can shoplift and we gotta like lock up all the shit. It's not okay that like you can't walk through certain neighborhoods while feeling unsafe. And when you have the right wing and Trump, right, who comes out and says, okay, we're going to crack down on these criminals, so we're going to have more cops and greater sentencing for these people. And when this does work, this is why the right wing believes this, because they're not going maximally.
Band-aids look good. I understand that the right wing has no capacity for any long-term planning whatsoever. However, I would advocate for them that they probably can do it if they try. So if we're talking about the cost-benefit analysis, what I am posing to you is you are suggesting something that will be stricter and doesn't actually solve the problem, particularly the problem I'm talking about in my tweet, which is what we're all here to talk about, which isn't psychopaths or gang members, which just do require different. No, it's not. DeCarlos Jr. isn't a psychopath. He is a schizophrenic. That's what I'm talking about. I don't know if you remember the tweet that you responded.
I'm using psycho.
I'm
using psycho in like a colloquial sense. I'm not talking about like antisocial personality disorder. I'm talking about he's a psycho. Like he's a fucking.
I love you equivocating. That's great for you. I'm talking about clinical.
He's
psychopaths.
a psycho.
Yeah, I understand the joke you're making.
You're gonna come at me for calling him a psycho?
No, I'm saying you're equivocating.
She's using it not the colloquial way.
I'm saying I get that I am using it clinically. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
And the population that I am talking about, you are suggesting the same treatment as the psychopath and the gang member. And I'm saying not only is that more costly, but also doesn't actually solve the problem. Whereas the substance abusing, mentally ill individuals, there are more cost-effective off-ramps that can actually get them contributing to society long term. And that's the option that I would like to take, and Republicans will never take it. They'd rather spend more money to just not see them on the streets.
This is the problem that I have. Like, I have a problem with you characterizing it as a band-aid solution, because ultimately, crime is the problem that we're trying to solve, and treating any individual ultimately is a band-aid solution, because eventually they're going to die, and there's going to be a new generation. Now, if this new, it's not.
Nobody should be conspiracy engaging with you like
it's not, because if there's a new generation that also has mental illness,
treating people as a band-aid because they eventually die in 80 years. Okay, and we live in a society. Yeah, true.
Hold up, please. If you have a new generation and they have like mental illness, which is gonna, unless you think that like giving people therapy is gonna like genetically fix the mental illness or something, you're gonna have mental illness in the younger generation, and you're gonna have to pay people to solve that problem too.
Great. I would love to talk to you
keeping
about
crime,
epigenetics.
crime,
I'll write a
crime,
note down of everything I can
crime.
stomp you on after.
Sure. Yeah, that's what's happening. Crime is a problem that
Might
needs to
be
be addressed.
tomorrow
Like, it's
night,
going to
given.
have to be
Depends on how
addressed
fast the
forever.
ad gets approved.
This is a problem that we have to ever wage in a free society of how do we deal with crime? How do we deal with people doing this shit? And you saying that, well, keeping the criminals locked up, that's just a Band-Aid solution. Empirically, it has like positive effects over time on reducing crime. So if by Band-Aid solution you mean, hey, it reduces crime by all these percentages, and instead I want to propose this that also reduces crime by percentages, and your percentages are a Band-Aid while my percentages are not, when the overall question is what's reducing crime, it's a nonsensical argument.
Well,
It's not a Band-Aid.
The point
No,
is,
it's
what
not-
you're talking
it's
about
not a-
generationally, and we're looking at it's like, yeah, obviously, it's a Band-Aid for the one person insofar as if you locked up a DUI person for the rest of their life, they're never going to do another DUI. They literally can't. They're in prison. But you look at the people now, not their kids and the next people who you haven't locked up yet, the people now who still commit DUIs and are not really significantly deterred by someone getting locked up for 3, for 5, or even just the idea that they might kill someone. There needs to be a better solution now, not for the next generation, for actually solving these things before they happen or getting ahead of these things. And obviously that's not what's not happening. So yeah, of course you can lock up these people, and in the short term or in the long term, they're never going to commit another crime, but you need a better thing, because otherwise you're just going to keep locking people up forever, over and over and over, every generation, and you won't get crime from those people, but the crimes keep happening every new generation. That's why it's a Band-Aid and not a how do we reduce the crime from the current populace from the incentives. Like that's what we're looking at here.
So, Phil, would you propose both?
Both what? Like locking up, but then also I think
would you have it be like
I would say there's some credence to we can have longer sentencing, but the longer sentencing isn't they're in prison longer. It's we are reducing them or removing them from the population longer, because here's your punishment, and then here's the involuntary what's the word we had? I totally forgot. Committed involuntary committed involuntary committed sentence that's like an additional 5 years. So hey, you had your DEI, you've served your punishment because you murdered someone, and no one should not be punished for that. But you also have now this mandatory, whether it's probation, whether it's like a AA like facility that you have to serve in, so that we can ensure that there's some sort of evidence-based reason thing that's going to prevent you from doing this again ever, and also having those services available to you before, like just healthcare in general, so these people aren't getting becoming alcoholics in the first place. But yeah, I think removing them longer from society isn't necessarily bad, but just hey, we're throwing you in prison for 20 years is not really the solution.
And just to be clear, the reason why I'm calling it a Band-Aid here is because you're suggesting a Band-Aid and I'm pointing out a staph infection. The staph infection being mental health proliferation and substance abuse, that in the most extreme instances, the sequelae of these things is violent crime. However, this problem extends way beyond crime. So you keep fixating on crime. Yeah, one of the effects of what I'm trying to solve would be a reduction in cases like Irina's tragedy. Obviously so. But also reduction of this effect would be dropped childhood neglect and dropped substance use and dropped suicides likely as well, right? What I'm talking about is the fact that mental health and substance abuse is not addressed within criminological systems, and they will continue to fall through the cracks forever because the criminal system isn't developed for dealing with the complexities of care that is required in a mental health case, right? There is evidence, for example, talking about these drug courts that Ant-Man has talked about. There is evidence to show that when drug courts are in highly sterile situations versus if they're in outdoor therapy, you can see a change in the efficacy of these things. And I want to invest money into looking into these things to actually treat the individuals, right? And so I'm calling it a Band-Aid because you're solving for the fact that there's a wound on your thigh, and I would like to solve for the fact that there is a staph infection within society. That's the reason why we're missing each other. I don't care about the fact that we can just lock them up forever. Number one, the civil rights groups are just never going to go for that, ever, just forever taking away people's rights, right? I'm okay with stiffer consequences for certain crimes because I think they're too easy on things like sexual assault. However, the idea that
who supports those sentences? Who supports the stiffer sentences
or not?
Well, in the case of sexual assault, oftentimes it's temporary.
No. Between the left and the right, who supports greater, stiffer sentences for those crimes you're talking about?
Sexual assault, I would imagine both. or very for.
Well, here, hold on. I'll throw
Between the
this.
two,
Wait.
who is
Lactode, I can
more
throw this
harsh?
at you. I conceded in the beginning. I think the left is horrible in New York and California. You brought this up on the thievery thing because you're right. The punishment, the lack of punishment for these specific crimes in these places is the reason people keep doing them. Which is why when they finally passed this prop a year ago to make it so you could actually arrest people shoplifting in California, all of the people that they arrest, you see them saying, "Wait, I thought it was
Based
totally
as
fine.
fuck.
You had to let me out if I was stealing less than 1,000." And yeah, those things did need bigger sentences. That is an example of the left going to far left. But this is for a very specific thing, which is thievery in these places. And I don't think
No,
this
I'm
is...
not. But I'm not talking about that. Right? I'm referring to violent crime, which the evidence shows
What I'm
also the
saying
right
to
wing
you-
proposals are effective. And so you said some crimes should have stricter penalties. Who do you think supports stricter penalties? And you're going to have to say it's the right wing.
Obviously,
So when you say the
Republicans.
right wing has no solutions, and you literally agree with one of their
I don't think
solutions,
stricter sentencing solves the staph infection either.
does it help crime? Does it help reduce crime?
In the way that they're not on the streets, yeah, but that to me is the
So crime goes
Band-Aid.
down?
That's not my problem, Lactoid. If you want to reframe my fucking tweet, by the way, to whatever you'd like it to be in your pet project, go make your own tweets and pop up on your own.
I did make
My
a tweet in response to your tweet.
You're right. You're welcome for giving you the 12K. My
Thank you.
tweet was
13K now.
specifically in response. Great. In a 60K tweet. My tweet was specifically
original,
in response
tweets
to
like this?
Irina
Yours.
and De Carlos. They were talking about killing him. And I was saying Republicans have no solutions for this, because what was all of the responses to Irina and De Carlos Brown Jr. from across the board Republicans? It was to kill him. And to be clear, stricter sentences doesn't prevent Irina's death. It just delays it. Because
It
if
could.
he's in jail, no, not for the amount of time that you would need to. De Carlos is what, 30? How long do you think we need to hold De Carlos?
If he's in jail for longer,
Hold on,
maybe he's not on that subway.
Hold on.
The
Yeah,
point is
Irina
not,
doesn't die,
yeah,
but
this
then
specific
Pete
person and this
dies
specific
instead.
thing. Yeah, like it's...
Like,
maybe
the-
another opportunity with the same kind of psychopathic break doesn't happen.
Hear me out. Hear me out. What if, rather than him being on the subway at all, he had his medication so that when he walks on the subway, he's a fully medicated schizophrenic
And then he
who's
never could have
reading
done
a book.
that.
Exactly. That's my fucking point.
And then he can't
You
commit
wanna do-
crime once he's has mental health treatment.
Nope. The issue is that you just want to delay the crimes that he does later, or hope that you can hold him until he's like 60, 70, 80 and is just too physically weak to do something, or maybe the psychosis will pass by then. What I would like to do is actually address the problem, which is the mental health issue in Irina's case, and I'm willing to broaden the conversation to substance abuse. I'm not talking about crime generally. That's not the conversation. It's about the intersection of severe mental illness and criminological tendencies. And that is not something that the right has an answer to. You haven't even offered it, because holding a schizophrenic man for an extra 10 years won't make him not paranoid and schizophrenic when he gets out.
So the tweet that you responded to was from Gunther Engelman. It says, "For the sake of your kids and for grandkids, stop voting Democrat." And it's a picture. Remember this face before you vote Democrats again. In this tweet, the death penalty is not mentioned. He's referring to Democrats being soft on crime, specifically violent crime. And your response is, the right has no solution on this when referring to a violent schizophrenic.
De Carlos.
Right?
Yep,
Right,
De
yes,
Carlos.
a violent schizophrenic. And it absolutely is the case, and we know, and I presented it multiple times, and you presented no empirical evidence. I presented specific studies that is referring specifically to...
I've used multiple fucking studies. I just haven't listed them. Do you want me to post them in the chat?
Hold on. Yeah, I was thinking in a discussion as opposed to me listing out studies and you responding with some kind of intuitive trait as to why my studies must be wrong. I would want you to show some. I would want you.
I've never said that your studies are wrong.
So this is crazy to me. You are simultaneously saying I never said your studies are wrong. I'm just saying that you have. But I'm just saying that you haven't even gotten close to proposing any kind of right wing solution.
So
when the studies that I'm referring to,
guess what?
when the studies that I'm referring to reduce crime, which is the problem and the original tweet.
Hold on. I want to remind everyone at the topic at hand. The topic of hand isn't who has solutions, it's who has better solutions, the right or the left.
To what? Solutions to what? To crime.
Right,
Is it specifically just a mental illness or to crime?
Initially, you did acknowledge this at the beginning.
And I'm addressing the tweet. I addressed it multiple times, and this applies to violent schizophrenics as well.
Lactoid, just to be clear, because at the beginning you acknowledged, obviously it is absurd to say we should kill every single person. But if I showed you a study, and it probably would be, or I could just show you this, the crime stats in like what, Singapore or any of these places. Hey, if we just kill people, or if we just lock them up for absurd amounts of time, that will reduce crime. Crime go down. That is the argument here. Obviously, that makes number go down. But we're talking about better solutions that aren't, what if we have draconian policies here? So you acknowledge that, yeah, this is absurd. We don't need to do this. But then you kind of keep bringing up this argument as like, well, see, look, crime went down when I did this thing. And we're saying, yeah, obviously the number's going to go down. But what if we had a better solution that didn't involve locking people up for absurd amounts of time, especially for crimes where that doesn't make sense to lock someone up for 10, 20, 30 years for a felony assault. That's the point.
And it won't prevent the next one. Most importantly, it won't prevent the next one. Because if you're a paranoid...
Okay. Yeah, Lactoid, then Ant-Man, because Ant-Man's been trying to get in here, and I want to make sure.
Can I just finish this last thought? Because he's just going to fucking reframe it. If you're a paranoid schizophrenic and you stay in jail for double the time, do you come out not a paranoid schizophrenic, Lactoid?
No.
Oh, okay, great. So your solution doesn't solve the problem. Awesome.
Soy pill. When you're
or not.
Obviously, when we're doing some kind of cost-benefit analysis, right? I'm kind of the same answer. What I'm proposing, your response to that would be, though, let's say I was the kind of person that would seriously come on here and say, you know what, we should just vaporize criminals. Just we have like these laser-mounted drones that go around and just, they see you committing a crime, just and then you're gone, right? Crime is done. This would be a solution to crime, and you would say, Lactoid, that's a bad solution, and here's why. Even though this would address crime, it's going to cause all these things that are really, really bad. And I disagree with your solution. I think it's going to create a society that I don't want to live in. Like on a lot of value beliefs that I hold in terms of justice, in terms of being able to live in a free society without getting vaporized for small missteps. This doesn't fit within this value kind of sphere that I have. So I disagree with your solutions, Lactoid. That would be a fair response. And this would be my response to somebody who's advocating for the vaporizing laser drones. But what the right wing is proposing, I don't think is nearly as intuitively disgusting to the vast majority of Americans, which is why people consistently rank Republicans as better on crime than Democrats. What they look at is, oh shit, this is bullshit that somebody, again, a drunk driver killed multiple people and only got a few years. This is bullshit that this guy got arrested 14 times, has multiple felonies, and is still out. This is bullshit that people can go shoplifting all the time and they don't get any kind of a real punishment. They just get a slap on the wrist.
Right, but
so in the same way, real quick, in the same way that you can appeal to the extreme punishment example on my end, I could appeal to your end of, well, let's just get rid of all punishment. Let's just not have any punishment. You murder somebody, we say, don't do that again, and then that's over. Obviously, that would also be ridiculous. But most Americans, and I think it's reasonable, are looking at closer to the right-wing position as being a more reasonable, and the evidence also shows efficacious for reducing crime. Okay. So it's more intuitive and it reduces crime.
First of all, I don't do this appeal to intuition thing. I don't really agree with this because, I don't really. First of all, people are saying that crime is one of their number one issues in this last election, but the stats just don't agree that violent crime is out of control to the degree that they think it is. They're vastly overrepresenting the problem. And in the same way, solution-wise, people might say intuitively, a person who kills my family in a DUI should be locked up for life. That might not be societally what is best. And that's why you look at stuff that people get really mad about, like when they had the sentencing from giving someone HIV in California reduced to a misdemeanor. And it's wait, fuck you. If you give me HIV, why the fuck should you not go to jail for the rest of your life? Why should that not be a felony? And you look at why they did it, and it's hey, if we reduce the sentence, people are more likely to get tested, because if they get tested and they do it, they are now implicated in a felony. But if we do make it a misdemeanor, people will go out, they'll get tested, they won't be worried about that felony, and actually HIV reduction is now happening. But that's not intuitive. I don't look at what people are appealing to as well, it makes sense that I want this punishment for this long. I look at what is going to reduce crime in the long run and actually stop people from committing the crimes in the first place. And yes, it is a stopgap. It is a band-aid to say, hey, if I just lock this person up for a very, very long time, people will be happier about it because people are very revenge-brained and they won't be committing crimes. But this ultimately is not solving the problem.
I want to make
sure that it does solve the problem of crime.
I want to make sure that Ant-Man gets a chance.
Which is the problem.
Hold on. I want
to. Hey, Soy Pill, do you think that the final solution was a solution, and you just happen not to agree with that one?
Okay.
I think I've addressed three different iterations at this point.
Seriously. Yeah. Well, you're still doing the
4.
thing.
And I
Is
give
the
an answer
final
every single
solution-
time.
Hey, where's my
So
shot
is the
collar
answer
button
yes?
for all
The
of
final
you, okay?
solution is a solution.
Come on,
Where's my
Hassan.
shot collar button? I want to
Is it?
Ant-Man next. Ant-Man.
He won't answer
we're
it
probably
because
like,
he knows his answer is yes with his logic.
Well, no, because I mean, Erudite, he did say obviously I don't want the
Hold on.
drone vaporizing thing.
Hey,
but the point is,
Scott,
it's incongruent.
Scott,
Okay,
no.
okay, all right. Okay.
Ant-Man, go.
we're probably 3 or 4 iterations from the point I wanted to make, but would you agree with me, and I guess I'll pose this to both of you on the left, that there was a failing here for DeCarlos Brown specifically, that he had multiple contacts with juvenile court, and they dismissed his charges, where maybe his schizophrenia didn't manifest at that age, but I would bet that there would have been mental health issues which would have been known about, and he could have gotten treatment through the juvenile court, which is about rehabilitation, not punishment. And we might have seen a different outcome here from him.
I agree. And if you want some studies, Lactoid, the thing that I'm suggesting, by the way, reduces recidivism, which is the thing we actually care about. I know you really want to reframe this as crime go
Not the
down.
only thing.
It's about recidivism, but it is. The conversation's about recidivism. Yep.
Nope.
My tweet.
So then they shouldn't have dismissed the charges
How your
against him
tweet
as a
says.
juvenile. They should have.
No, I don't believe in dismissing tweets at all. I think that in tweets, sorry, in crimes.
Dismissing
I think when
charges.
we
I dismiss tweets all the time, but fair enough.
yeah,
Dismiss
I
my
think
tweet.
I think when we dismiss charges, I think what we do is we lose the paper accountability of tracking the escalation. And it's like all of it matters in all of these things. I think if you dismiss a charge, the off-ramps that are offered, especially for youth, because there's a lot more. I imagine in Pennsylvania it's the same, that there's probably a lot more like rehabilitative focused stuff for youth specifically. It tends to be more effective with youth as well, right? If we don't charge that individual, they're likely not able to access those rehabilitative things in the first place, which is part of the problem, right? I don't know if Pennsylvania like locks and keys your under 18 charges and stuff, because in Canada you can't look up somebody's charges under 18. No.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, they're sealed.
Which is like one of the problems, because it's really, really hard to get a crime with any amount of charges in your history. So even if you're 32 and you had a charge at 16, that can create a lot of problems, which is why some countries will hide it, but there's problems with that. Back to Lactoid. Is the final solution a solution that you just happen to disagree with?
A solution to what problem?
Jewish
I'm
crime.
the Jews.
If you're specifically concerned about Jewish crime, it would be a solution to that. But I don't think
Okay.
Jewish people are a problem, right? In the same way,
Okay.
I think we all
I
agree
would
crime
say-
is a problem, right? Do you agree crime is
Okay.
a problem?
Let me answer you. I would say the final solution is not a solution at all. Because it
Hold on.
is
If you thought Jews were a problem, it would be a solution.
No, because just like taking paperwork and throwing it in the garbage doesn't solve the issue of paperwork. It's
If
fucking
you think
banal.
Jews existing is
You're
a
actually doing the
problem,
semantic thing.
Oh, if you think
That's
Jews
fine.
existing is a
I'm
problem,
granting it.
then
Yeah,
it would be.
You're fucking retarded. Everyone else, when they say solution, is talking about an intervention that makes for a better world. I don't think the final
about
solution
reducing a
is
problem.
an intervention that, yeah, I want a better world. Okay?
I do too. I want less crime.
I think that the final solution is not a solution at all.
I
even though
agree it's
we
not a
gave it the
solution because
name
I
of
don't think
that.
Jews are a problem. But if I
Well,
did think
apparently
that
you
were a
did.
problem,
Well, you're literally
Yeah,
saying,
what?
if I agreed
I do
that this
not.
is the problem. Yes, you said if I
yeah.
agreed.
okay, it's a
I am
hypothetical.
He said he
saying-
didn't want the
I am
laser
saying-
drones. He didn't want.
If
She
I
keeps
agreed,
trying. She
no,
keeps
if I
going.
agreed, no, because you're doing a semantic, stupid, retarded.
This is not
black
semantics
void
at
shit.
all.
It is
You are
semantic
doing
because
semantics. Is the
Nope.
final solution a solution because it's got the word solution in the title? That's literally what you're
you
doing right
said yes. I say
If-
no.
now. If you think Jews are a problem, then it is a solution to that problem.
Even
I don't
then,
think Jews are.
I
Stop,
say
stop.
no.
I don't think Jews are a problem.
I don't
Hold on.
care.
If you
You
think
thi-
if you think that you
Yeah.
think hold on. If you're saying
I get
that
it.
even
It's a
if somebody
solution you
accepts
disagree
Jews
with.
are a problem, if you're saying that even if Jews are a problem, if you accept that the final
That I don't
solution is
think-
not a solution to that,
Yeah,
then you're
no.
just being like entirely functionally irrational right now.
What
No,
if,
because
reason
a
why-
solution,
the reason
a
why
solution
the
is
reason
something
why
that makes
I
the
don't
world
think-
a better place.
And
right?
if you think Jews
I
are
have-
making the world a worse place, then it would be a solution, wouldn't it?
No.
Why? Wait, how?
what if
Because-
I,
Wait,
hold on,
stop.
what if-
Genociding
Just answer that
millions
question.
of people makes the world a
Yeah,
worse
Swipe is
place.
confused. Your ally
even
is
with
confused.
crime.
Yeah, wait, Kyla.
Stop, stop,
I
stop.
mean,
Your ally is
if you
confused.
thought
I'm
that getting
testing
rid of them
your
all-
language. I'm testing your language.
Yes, and I passed the test.
Because-
Sweet pill, go ahead.
This is my language that we're using here. I'm asking if the final solution is a solution by your definition
Stop
of
cutting off
solution.
your ally.
If Soy Pill also agrees that it's a solution by his autistic definition, then your guys' ways of framing what a solution is.
Can I say what I think about the final solution, please?
Hold on. I want to hear.
Just to be clear, I've barely gotten my thoughts out.
Okay. So Kyla, I understand what you're saying because this is like again the ad absurdum argument you brought up, but also yes, in the framing of if I thought all Jews were a problem,
it's about semantics.
But wait,
it's not ad absurdum. Stop.
Wait,
no, because you're wrong. You're wrong. You're wrong.
You haven't even let me. No, you haven't let me finish my thing.
I don't need to let you finish. You said this is ad absurdum and fallacy. I'm not saying it's ad absurdum. I'm saying that he's using a different definition of solution than I am, which is why we keep talking past each other.
Okay. No, I got you. You're just using the word definition. But to be clear, the final solution also wouldn't work even in that case, Lactoid, because that is what they tried and it didn't work because what you cause is a bunch more problems in the communities that you're trying to exterminate, and then they go and they make nuclear bombs and you fucking lose because you're causing more problems.
That's why it's not a solution. Even if you think the Jews are a problem, it's not the solution.
It reduced a lot of hold on. The Holocaust reduced a tremendous amount of Jews in comparison to how much they were before.
It also led to Germany being invaded and them being utterly destroyed.
So
and
there were some side effects of the solution. There were some side effects of the solution in their mind, right?
No.
Of that, right? So if you thought,
but even with Israel, there's still a tremendous amount fewer Jews than there would have been.
Okay, as a direct result that you can trace 1-to-1 from to the Holocaust, right? So. I mean, let's be real.
Stop. Wick.
Well, we're doing this thing. He's doing this like equivocating thing where he's saying.
I'm not. You're using a proprietary definition that doesn't exist in reality.
No, it's my tweet. I get to use it how I would like.
It's a retweet that doesn't specify any of this shit. It's a retweet to a conservative who was saying something that I was saying.
Wait, is it my words?
Today? I'm having.
What's the topic?
Does that mean? So does that mean that I would understand how I would?
Wait. What's the topic? Wick?
Topic is
read the topic again.
My tweet? Is it my tweet?
Okay, it's your retweet.
Hold on.
It's Gunther's tweet.
First of all, it's a quote tweet.
For the topic, the inspiration for the topic is Erudite's tweet, but the topic itself is who has a better solution to crime, the right or the left? I may have said the left or the right. I forget, right? But one of those two. And so, while yes, the tweet is referenced and is used as the lens we're discussing this from, the topic is a little broader.
Even looking at the tweet, I'm totally right. Like I'm not misrepresenting the tweet at all. You guys can go look at the tweet. Everything I'm saying is correct.
So if you think, I'll just walk us through really calmly here, okay? If you think that the final solution is a solution by the way that you're using the word solution, if yes, then suggesting that your intervention is a solution is now meaningless. Because everyone would look at the final solution and agree that it was horrifying. And even if you agreed that Jews were a problem, it leads to the sequelae of so many negative effects that it's not actually a solution. Remember that cool thing you were doing called the cost-benefit analysis we're doing here? When I'm talking about a solution, begged into the solution is the cost-benefit analysis, where we look at applying an intervention and seeing if it leads to better outcomes. And the idea of just locking people up for an extended amount of time so that they just do less crime, I'm saying is bad cost-benefit analysis. You're applying the final solution. What I want instead is an integrated solution to specifically the intersection
of a school bus?
Mental health, severe mental health, and violent crime. And just locking a man up longer won't make him suddenly not a paranoid schizophrenic when he gets out of jail. But community care, if you want studies, integrated community care with drug court and outpatient support afterwards has reductions of crime by 40%. Recidivism specifically, actually, which is the thing that we should be concerned about.
Okay, so I'm going to address the first part because, again, this is like being
after you
once again.
Want Ant-Man to go. Okay.
That's fair. So when specifically when the question is the final solution, I have to.
No. Ant-Man's like, I don't know what to talk about in this Holocaust conversation.
Sorry, Ant-Man.
I don't know. Wick. If we're doing we have to do the cost-benefit analysis. My Jewish family is really annoying. Can you imagine being in a room full of like 100 Jewish families? That would be so stupid.
You told me this wasn't going to be like Monday, and it is in fact worse than Monday.
I apologize.
I don't know what he
Blackwood's
said.
fault.
Look,
He wants
I-
the final
look,
solution. I don't know what to tell you.
Okay, well, I got to respond to the
there's
final
two,
solution
I
thing.
think that's a
there's
good
two,
idea.
concurrent
'Cause
variables.
no, I do not
Well,
think it's a
it
good
is.
idea.
One
It
being-
is a solution. It's just not the best one. Okay, well, I'm talking about solutions that are actually.
I don't.
good
I didn't even say it was like a solution. So
You
wait,
literally
please.
said it is a
So-
solution if
so
you
I'm
think
gonna
Jewish
respond
crime is a
like-
problem.
like-
So
like-
go
Yeah.
ahead.
So that if is doing massive amounts of lifting there on the statement you just made, and conveniently you
No.
keep leaving that out every single time you've
it's
mentioned
not
it
doing that much
beforehand.
lifting because
The
you and I
reason-
both
it's-
agree that
it's-
crime
it's
is the
doing-
problem. It's an analogy.
Erudite, please. This would be
Within
like
this
saying,
analogy, you have to grant that you
Jesus
agree with
Christ.
Hitler about the problem.
Jesus
Okay.
Christ.
Lactoid has the floor.
Okay,
Lactoid,
I'll
go
mute.
ahead.
Thank you. I'm having flashbacks to Dylan Burns. Okay. So this would be like saying, if you didn't eat breakfast this morning, would you be hungry? And you say, aha, you think that you'd be hungry if you ate breakfast, or like eating breakfast is correlated with hungerness, or eating food is related to hungerness. Well, no, the if there is very important, because if I'm saying, like, if you consider like this to be a problem,
Lactoid is not dog
does
whistling.
this
the final
solve that
solution.
problem? And the definition of solution, by the way, is something that solves a problem. Then yes, of course, it is a solution. Now, I don't think Jews are a problem, so I don't think the final solution was a solution, because I don't think it solves a problem. I think Jews are just fine. I got Jewish friends. A lot of the people I went to law school with are Jewish.
I believe you. I'm sorry.
I'm
just
a
so
lawyer.
it's clear.
I know a lot of Jews.
I love Lactoid.
And they're good people.
Lactoid and I are good friends. Okay, I
Jewish
sent
people
him
are great
so many.
people.
He laughed at all of my memes that I sent him the other night. Okay, so
I
me and
laughed at one of
Lactoid are
them.
good.
To
One
be
of them
fair,
were
I would
fun.
expect you
Okay,
to be more
that's fair.
anti-Semitic
The
as a
second one I
lawyer,
laughed at.
hanging out with the,
You would
the
ex-
ones
you would
that
expect-
I know. Yeah.
Look, the Jews, they took me in. I hung out with them. Anyway, so I'm fine with Jews. So I don't think that the final solution is a solution
Ant-Man, are
to
you
any-
fine with
to-
Jews? We
to-
just
to-
need to
to
check.
any problem.
But
But-
Lactoid, the point is
Perfectly
But
Lactoid, the point
I
is
think
not.
crime is a solution,
Hold on,
right?
let- let-
So
let-
crime is the
But
problem.
Lactoid, the point is,
Hold on,
even
let-
if
are
you
you done
truly
with
thought that Jews were a problem, the final solution, it doesn't work. And what Kyla was saying was, this causes all of these downstream effects where, yeah, sure, you got rid of them, you put them in the camps, but now you're creating this massive wave of resistance, this massive spotlight on yourself, and the cost-benefit analysis is, oops, now we lose the war, we don't ultimately get rid of them all, because all of these other things happen, because we're increasing the rates of resistance here, because we're increasing the flight and of all the smart ones to develop weapons that stop us. So,
No, so
this is
that's a
this is a
prediction.
silly analogy. I'll grant you this. I don't know why we keep bringing up the Holocaust, but the point is, when we're talking about the crime in America, it's 80 years later, the point is, yeah, if we lock these people up for 20, 30 years, this is
before you
going to
bring it back
solve
to
the
crime.
short-term thing.
Okay, Lactoid.
But-
Lactoid,
before
Lactoid,
yes,
just
before
real quick,
you bring it back to
there's a
crime.
question for you that you can answer.
Wait, I have to.
You cross
Hold
the
on. Be
street-
fair. I got cut off a little bit. I just want to quickly finish my thought.
Okay, yes, but you can in 1 second. If you're walking down the street and on one side there's a Jewish person coming towards you, on the other side there's a black person coming through you, which side of the street you gonna go on?
I'm not answering that question publicly. I'll send you the answer later.
Okay,
It's what you guys would think. Okay. So it depends on your evaluation of the problem, Soypil, and it depends on what your prediction is on what addressing the problem might do. So if you think that by devoting resources to the Holocaust, it would cause you to lose the war, then that might not be a solution worth doing. But if, again, assuming this is all, if you consider Jewish people
I
to be a
got
problem,
it.
if you know you're going to lose the war either way, or if you think you have substantively the same chances of winning or losing the war, and you think that, well, at least we can remove some of them, at least we can drop, I mean, it depopulated Europe for a long time, like it reduced them by tremendous millions and millions of people, then this could be a, like, at least solution that would make sense to the Nazi brain, right? Assuming
it makes sense. Obviously, that's why they did it. But the point is, right? Like, if you look at the solutions that we have for crime, it's like, yeah, locking people up longer is a solution, and that's why we brought up the absurda thing, and you acknowledge, like, yeah, the drone thing is also a solution. It's going to vaporize people, but ultimately, what is this actually going to do? What kind of community are you living in? Is it something that's going to prevent crimes from happening in the future, or are you just making it so that every time someone commits a first offense, you've now locked them up forever? Cool, but now people are still committing crimes, and we haven't really solved the problem.
I'm not saying lock them up forever for a single crime.
Sure, sure. I'm not even accusing you of that. But that's
Republican, yes, sure. But I've noticed this has happened a few times, not just with you, but I've noticed a few times where it's like, just lock them up forever. Like, I'm not the one saying like you're just let them out of jail and just give them a therapist. Like that would be like the equally hyperbolistic way of describing your position, which I'm not saying that's what your position is. What I'm saying is
forever,
that
but like you know, double, triple sentences, right? Like
the value proposition that you would have when it comes to, well, I don't want to live in the society with the vapor drones, the vaporizer drone. Yes, we agree with that. But what I'm saying is that what people want is much closer, I think, overall to what I propose than what what the modern left proposes, what the Democrats propose. And just be clear, like I said in my intro, I'm not saying the left has no solutions. They have some solutions that I think are good, right? I think drug courts are a good idea. I'm okay with drug courts. I think that mental health treatment, especially while incarcerated, and involuntary confinement of people who are a danger to themselves or others with severe mental illness, I think that's a good idea. Now, the right wing proposes that, and Donald Trump proposes that, but I think that's a good idea regardless. I thought it was a good idea beforehand. But I also think it's a good idea to not have high crime under policed areas, which the studies consistently show has a good return on investment. For every dollar, one study found for every dollar you spend on a cop, you get $1.63 in social benefit. Like there are benefits to having cops patrol areas to reduce crime. I think it's also a benefit if somebody who is crazy like this, or violent or reckless, or an addict to the point where it's like they're actually like a threat to other people, like when it comes to drunk driving, for example. I think there's also benefits to, hey, like we can't have you go to prison for like 2-3 years, or even like 5, depending on what the penalties are, like, or what the crime is. For some of these crimes, like the penalties need to be longer. I'm not saying for life, but I'm saying like longer. And most Americans agree.
Right. So again,
Okay.
oh god, yeah, I was talking a lot, but I'm
No,
assuming
go
you
ahead.
heard all of that.
I'm
mean,
gonna like
this is a
somewhat-
redirection of a previous point. You can go right after me. But my point was, yeah, but I don't go on what most Americans agree is the best thing. I look at what is going to reduce crime and not do these trade-offs where, yeah, obviously, you and I wouldn't want to live in a world where, you know, they were vaporizing people, but that's like the specific thing of like, let's not just kill everyone for every crime. There are things that you and I both agree on where it's like, hey, they've really been too easy on petty theft in these 2 coastal states. They need to increase the crime rate, punishments for these, because clearly there's a clear structure of incentive of these people are doing it because they know that they'll get away with it. But when we're talking about mental health, when we're talking about violent crime, when we're talking about these things that once you lock them up and, you know, that maybe we agree we can have some sort of like care in the facilities or at least have better probation periods, just locking up and then making them in prison longer isn't the solution. And if you're on board with these like more mental health things, I guess the only bridge we can build is if Donald Trump actually fucking follows through and funds these things, awesome, then we can say the right wing did have a solution that worked. But if it's just increase the sentencings, I don't necessarily that works for most things, but yes, on theft.
You would agree though that like, and maybe your threshold is just lower than mine, or higher than mine, I suppose. You would agree that like, let's say somebody like has mental health issues, commits a murder, and then like goes into like mental health treatment, and then is like has mental health treatment, has medication, and then gets out in 8 years, and then they do it again. Like there is maybe, I don't know if you think that time is enough for like life in prison, or like there's some
but that's the thing,
number of times
they should be institutionalized at that point in like a mental health facility, like an
for
asylum.
For life, right?
Potentially for life, but not necessarily for life, because I need to look at the root cause of what's causing them to be violent. I would need to look at like why, like, is the medication, like, did it work in the first place? Was there like a follow through? Was there like, you know, there's so many different bureaucratic things that come up here that's like, no, I don't think they should just be in prison for the rest of their life because they did a violent crime after going through these things, which may or may, okay, even if it's murder, like it depends. It really does depend. So I don't know. Like, yeah.
The solution has to be oriented towards an outcome that we prefer, right? The reason why I keep nailing you with the Adolf Hitler thing is because you're doing a lot of like equivocating with your words that I think is stupid and annoying, right? When I'm saying solution, when I'm saying that I don't think
I get what you want, but I don't like the Hitler
problem.
thing.
What I'm saying is that they don't have a solution that leads to a better world, right? Like we can get into it. You're not going to like it if I like walk you down the Hitler analogy. So if you'll just grant me that the way that you are using the word solution, I am sitting here and I'm telling you that isn't a solution because it isn't a world that I prefer. I do not want paranoid schizophrenics locked up for longer in jail, just at all. I want them in integrated mental health hospitals with community care programs that they can transition into. I don't want them in jail whatsoever, likely because these people are the most likely to do random acts of violence in jail. They're also very likely to be in solitude for a large portion of it as a result of it. They're also the types who are likely to do sorts of biological assaults, which every time that I experience situations of biological assaults, so for those who don't know what I'm talking about, it's like flinging poo, or people who have hep C will bite their cheek and try to spit it at you in jails. Okay. So the main instances when I have experienced this of people using biological assault like tactics, it's oftentimes very
Alan,
mentally
more
ill
cops
individuals.
does decrease
Because
crime in
these
certain
people are
aspects,
better
but it doesn't get rid
handled
of crime, which is
in
the point.
healthcare
Otherwise, you just
facilities
increase cops
where they're
to
not in an
infinity.
environment that triggers them. Because guess what? Schizophrenic paranoia, it's made worse by high stress situations. And you can imagine jail and Gen Pop is very stressful, right? And so your solution to the problem, which is the intersection, doesn't exist. Holding them longer doesn't solve the problem at all, which is why I'm saying the right doesn't have solutions to this. The left is the only one right now willing to offer care. Now, to be clear, I don't actually think asylums inherently have to be a left principle or a right principle. I think kind of both sides could make arguments for it. However, right now, it's mostly the left suggesting increasing mental health spending, increasing mental hospital beds, and increasing funding for community care programs. And that's why the right has no solutions for it, because they won't get behind these three things, which we need to solve the problem.
If I could, I don't know if you want to, I can respond to that, or if you want to let some Ant-Man specifically.
Ant-Man to try to get in. We are running on.
Ant-Man, what's your view on the final solution?
Yeah. Do you like Jews?
No.
Jews, yes or no?
You don't like Jews?
Yes or no?
Whoa!
I'm not getting into any of that part of the conversation at all.
Wise.
That's crazy that he said.
Do you have
live
anything
stream
on
that he
any
hates
other
Jews?
part of this conversation that you want to take the time? Now that we're coming kind of towards the close of this.
I don't know. There's been so much flung back and forth here, and I don't quite know where to start. I think I'm going to go back to something I already said, which is I understand that there are people with severe mental health issues, and the left side here thinks that incarcerating them longer is not the best plan. The only problem with that is that when you let them out, you run the risk of the problems they have while they are in secure treatment and doing the things that you have concerns about the staff and patients, by the way, that they are doing that in public. At some point, you have to keep the public safe. That is part of the criminal justice system. So, no, I don't think people should be locked up the first time they do something wrong. But when you have multiple severely violent criminal problems, criminal record, I think it's time to start keeping people from society for public safety. I don't know what else you want me to say to that, because
or in like a mental health hospital for the DeCarloses.
This is a good question. I know where you're going, Ant-Man. Go ahead.
Yeah.
What would the difference between those two be to you? What would they look like?
Latroid's so excited. He's such a fucking dumbass. Okay. The difference is, as somebody who has worked in both jails and non-voluntary lockups, is that typically jails, when they do have mental health stuff, it's almost exclusively optional. It's something elective that people can sign up and participate in. It's never required. Whereas in a mental health care facility, the mental health care is obligatory. You must attend. It also is way better at having psychiatrists come in. It typically will have smaller pods of care. So a really big mantra within most mental health care is pods of 12. Most group therapy is most effective in pods of 12, which is why in a lot of, if you look at mental hospitals, you'll actually have a pod of 12 people that move around together and go to all their classes and stuff together. So one of the major differences is obligatory treatment versus just general treatment. Another thing is really important is the peers that you're around during care. If you're at a mental health hospital where you're obligated to do mental health and you all know that you're at a mental health hospital, you can imagine the type of zeitgeist that's created. Whether they're resentful of it or not, everyone is there who is aware of the fact that they're there for mental health issues. The criminological elements that often get suffused into it won't be there as much because gang members and psychopaths are not the people I'm suggesting being into these programs. And there's actually a really, really big problem when you take mentally ill people
with substance abuse issues and you put them in a program housing a bunch of gang members, particularly because gang members look at that individual, they know that they can absolutely take advantage of them, especially if they get them hooked on drugs in jail that they have access to, and they can get that person to do a lot more crimes. They can take advantage of that person, and abuse often subsides. But also, most importantly, this person now gets pulled into a criminological social group that they will have access to when they leave jail. It's really, really, really important that the peer group you're around during treatment or jail actually affects the thing that's going on. So the mental health facility not only is obligated mental health care, but it also has a milieu that is oriented around mental health, not criminological like propensities.
And just a question on that before you go. For you, Kyla, can you cite any American examples of this working, like a city or a state that has implemented what you're talking about that has shown success?
I don't actually know. My understanding is California has implemented a number of drug courts. So I and I were fighting about this a while ago. But no, I haven't looked into specific instances of specific cities at this point.
Yeah. Fair enough.
Would you actually do me a favor? Because I'm curious, actually, given your profession and your expertise. Would you take a look at the programming at SCI Waymart in Pennsylvania, Waymart? Tell me if you feel like that comports with.
Can you say that again?
I have to do it now.
Oh.
SCI, State Correctional Institution, Waymart, Waymart, because that is our mental health state correctional institution in Pennsylvania.
Fucking way.
That is where all
Guys,
of our
good news.
severely mentally ill.
Looks like they actually did a ceasefire deal.
Go. So it is.
We're gonna go over that afterwards, but holy shit.
I'm mostly curious, and you don't have to tell me now. You can message me. I'm genuinely curious.
Yeah, I'm just going to caveat this a lot. Everyone's website always looks great. What it actually looks like on the ground is oftentimes very different, which I'm sure you know. So I can do my best. Unless I'm on the ground seeing like who they fire, like staff turnover is like a really, really big thing when you're looking at like, and the reason I know so much about this, like ironically, is that I want to run a treatment center for young boys leaving the juvenile facility. So I research treatment facilities for young offenders a lot. A really, really important thing is actually in programmatic stuff is how to get staff out when they experience compassion burnout, which gets really problematic with unions. Not that I'm anti-union, but it can be really hard to fire staff that have burnt out and hate the kids now. Or I'm saying kids because I'm focused on youth most of the time. Or the adults, right? Where all of a sudden a program that's CBT infused and it's got the 12, like it's got all the psychological principles that look really shiny, but it's filled with a bunch of staff who hate the kids. Well, it turns out therapy is not very effective when there's no rapport, right? And so I can only judge it so much, essentially.
And I understand that, and I agree with you that the gloss of a website, this is a state website, so it's not going to be that glossy. It's going to be different than what actually happens. But I'm mostly curious about your thoughts on the programming, and then if you want to go beyond that, since you talked about juvenile, I would be curious as to your thoughts on SCI Pine Grove, which is where we send our juveniles who have been charged as adults until they hit the age of 21. I'm just curious if that sort of meets, because then that would be a state that is providing the programming that you say is critical and beneficial.
Okay.
And that's it.
Okay. I'm going to read the rest of my super chats, then we're going to go closing statements, and then we're going to
ask one really quick question. It's super unrelated.
Oh, sure.
What's the average age you find that boys, like young offenders, will be shifted to being treated as an adult offender? Like, what's the average age you see that young boy will be treated as an adult? Because let's be honest, it's mostly boys.
Hey, it's me.
Well, I mean, that's not an easy question to answer.
Depends
because
on the crime.
We have.
Is it crime dependent more so?
Well, we only direct file, which means we charge them as adults directly, is if they commit a crime with a weapon, with a firearm. Okay. I think is actually the requirement.
Sorry, guys, I'm a little distracted because if this ceasefire actually happened,
Pennsylvania has a very good juvenile justice system, and that's probably in part. If you don't know, up in Luzerne County, we had that absolute disaster with those two judges 15 years ago, where they were, in essence, sending kids and getting kickbacks to particular programs, and so we had a serious overhaul. Still good before that, but yes, it takes up quite a bit for us to certify a child to juvenile to adult court, and we often have success decertifying juveniles charged as adults back into juvenile court.
Gotcha.
Okay, let's get through these super chats. 3 months tier 1 membership. Thank you. From Okala? I'm not sure how you say your name. How many crazies doing crime are we talking about? Which is a question. How much of the crime is committed by schizophrenics or other mental health issues or psychopaths, right?
Well, if you
I'm not
include
sure.
substance abuse, up to 60%. If you include ADHD, you're getting into like the 80s, 90s potentially.
Not sure if we. Fair enough. No, that's a good
So
answer.
from what I've seen, if we're talking
I
about
wouldn't
like
include ADHD.
like
myself.
I think there's like a specific term. It's like significant mental illness, like SMI, significant mental illness. It's like it's disproportionate relative to the community, of course, but it's still a minority. Most crime is committed by people who are not like don't have like a severe mental illness. They just are criminologically motivated.
Mhm. And then the
Okay.
rest are usually drug abusers who do
$10
crime in the
from
name of
Doobie.
drugs.
How many times do we pay for these people to go through rehab before they're a lost cause, draining my tax money? $10.
I don't have a perfect answer, but at some point, yeah, they should probably like the issue is that there are mentally ill people who have substance abuse issues and are also complete dirtbags. And those people probably need more of the jail route, right?
And also, if you're
So-
looking at an analysis of tax dollars and programs and you're like, wow, like this is not preventing people from abusing again. This is not preventing people from doing drugs. That's when you go in and you reevaluate. Obviously, not just cut the program altogether and never, replace it with anything, but do something where, yeah, it's clear that people are just going through this over and over and over again and it's not working. You would need to reevaluate that. Yeah.
$10 from Dewey. Should we cut our losses at some point? Seems like the alternative is we have people constantly draining resources and harming their communities. $20 from Audacity. Shame on you, Lactoid. Carlos wasn't insane. He was a knife enthusiast that spoke to ghost aliens in his brain. It's our fault for not understanding him. Maybe he just needed a sandwich. $10 from Not So Schizophrenic. To be punished for what we deserve, because we ought to have known better, is to be treated as human, made in God's image. To believe that all mentally ill people have zero agency is to dehumanize them.
I think it's funny that this person's accusing Erudite of all people of thinking that mentally ill people are just like these animals who can just
Compounds.
go out and act completely on impulse. Like, of all people to accuse of that is pretty funny.
Yeah.
I thought-
to be
He's
Hold on,
right,
wait,
actually. If you have
isn't that
any
the-
letters behind your name, you just have no agency.
Just to point out, though, isn't that sort of the implication if you say that deterrence doesn't work on these individuals?
Specifically, we said deterrence in the case of Carlos D'Angelo, who was the very minute percent where they might actually be in Canada, he'd probably be NCR'd. You guys don't use your not guilty by reason of insanity very often, is my understanding, but in Canada, we're more open to it. I don't know if he was in touch with reality. It's hard to say.
But also
There's
just
Sounds
the
like he
idea of
wasn't
like,
guilty but mentally ill.
Well, that's the thing. Did he realize? Okay, we had the case of Vincent Lee in Canada. Okay, we had a guy in the middle of a schizophrenic episode walk onto a greyhound. He was told by God that there was a demon sitting in front of him, and the only way to free and save salvation was to cut off the demon's head and eat it. So he cut off the man's head in front of him and ate it. How responsible is he for that? I don't know. DeCarlos is more because he knows he has schizophrenia and he's not taking his meds than Vincent Lee when it was his first psychotic episode. He's definitely more responsible, but I don't know the degree to which DeCarlos was in an extreme acute psychotic episode, because there are spectrums of these. There are people in a psychotic episode that still have some level of grounding of like knowing that you can't punch people, right? I don't
the point
know.
is it's not a dichotomy of they are or are not aware of their actions. The point is, does them being aware of their actions and having a punishment stop them from doing it again? And if a mental health facility or some sort of funding would help them not commit another crime, other than, hey, we locked you up for longer this time, then it seems like that's the better option.
Okay. $5 from Flaming Pie. The violent schizo is still dangerous even with treatment. It only takes a lapse in medication or change in brain chemistry for another violent incident.
One, that's not actually true. Paranoid schizophrenics are the most likely of the severe mental illness to cause like violence, but like they're not super inclined. They can have a relapse of a psychotic episode and just not have a paranoid delusion, or have a paranoid delusion that doesn't make them violent. So It's not even.
Hey, Josiah, thanks for stopping in
$5
for the
from
$2.
Alexander
But I see
Wren.
how it is. When
Does
you're
lactoid
angry
consider
at Wick
crime
and
committed
his
in
panel,
jail?
you give him 50, but me, you give 2. Don't even pay me for living learning.
These
You let
studies
Hutch
do,
harass me the
especially
whole time.
the one I specifically referenced,
Love you, buddy.
the drop with greater sentencing does, because it lists incapacitation as one of the causes of reduced crime. So this would include people in jail as well. But even if it was the case, I think that there is better options for us for people in jail who pose a threat to other inmates than people like around the rest of us, good, hardworking, productive citizens of the country.
Okay. $10 from Not So Schizophrenic to say, if we replace fluoride in city water supply with Vyvanse, could this possibly be a moderate democratic solution to prevent millionaires from buying CP from teenagers and threatening colleagues with death?
Jesus.
Thank you for the $10.
Well, so I'm not going to address that real quick, but there actually is a proposal to put lithium in the drinking water to reduce aggression. That's been proposed a few times.
$10 from Doobie. That California HIV law is about the intentional spreading of HIV, not unintentional. How does giving people who intentionally spread a lifelong illness a slap on the wrist prevent the spread of HIV?
Right. So here's how it worked. People were going to jail for felonies for intentionally spreading HIV, but the only way to prove that they knew that they had HIV was if they went and got a test. So what was happening was people who were worried about getting prosecuted for that law, whether that's because they were intentionally or were not intentionally spreading it, were just worried about being prosecuted for it, were not getting tested. So ultimately, although this law makes perfect sense, I think most people here would just intuitively be like, yeah, if you give someone HIV, you should go to jail for a felony because that could kill them. Now, although it is less deadly now, the point is fuck you for doing that. But turns out you get less spread of HIV if you reduce the sentence to a misdemeanor, because even though people now sometimes spread it, you are reducing the spread overall because more people are getting tested, and when they know they have it, they try not to give it to other people. So it's ultimately the outcome-based solution, even if it doesn't make intuitive sense.
Couldn't you address that though by adding a new crime as well, that simply like you can get convicted of the crime if you spread HIV at all, or you can
how could you prove that they knew they had it? Is the point?
Well, no, you would make like a reckless. It would be like a reckless crime. So like if you don't get tested, like if you can prove that you've been tested within the last 3 months, then like that's a defense to the accusation. But if you have not gotten tested for HIV in the last 3 months and you transmit HIV, I think that should be a crime.
Well, here's the thing. I understand what you're saying, because again, that makes intuitive sense of like, yeah, if you had some sort of way to check for it. The point is, most people do get tested. Most people, when they get tested, don't have HIV. And if they do have HIV, they usually don't give it to people. But some people don't care. There are some sick fucks out there that just are like, I'm going to give people HIV. I don't care. I want to get my rocks off. And the problem is, for the most part, people are more worried. There are more people more worried about getting charged for that felony, and that's why they don't get tested. So if you were to somehow make a way like, hey, if you got tested and you have it, or you don't have it, but then you somehow gave it to someone, then it's not a felony. But if you knew you had it, then it is a felony. You'd have to work out the math there. The point is, overall, this law just reduced people spreading it over, like in general, and that's better, even if you're not punishing people for life. But also, HIV is not a death sentence anymore. You could just take a couple of pills.
Okay.
That doesn't mean you should. That
was only a $10 question. We don't need a $50 discussion on this.
It's not just it's a horrific treatment. But
no, it is. It is. I'm not saying it's okay. I'm just saying it's not murder at this point.
$5 from AK Batozai to say, Wick, what's Kayla's solution, and have her explain her treatments. I don't know if there's a Kayla on the panel, but there's a Kyla, and so Kyla, go ahead.
He can resend the money with my name spelled right.
Got you. Alexander Rim for $5. Is euthanasia a solution to cancer?
That's for lactoid, I'm assuming.
I don't know.
Yeah, it would be a really bad solution, but yeah, it would be. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah,
I think there's a lot of Chinese international students that were pretty good in the medical field, from my experience.
Euthanasia.
Here's a good question in response to that. Like, would chemotherapy that has a high risk of killing you be a solution to cancer?
Alexander Rin, send your answer. $5 from Audacity. Nailing you with the Adolf Hitler thing, that usually costs extra. Thank you for the $5. And then finally, $5 from Pondering Politics to say, what is every Canadian's favorite letter? A. Get it?
Fucking Josiah. That was dumber than my joke.
Nice.
Fair enough. With that, gang, this has been a riveting discussion. I actually enjoyed most of it. We did go a little bit off the rails on the the Jew thing. But other than that, we're great. $10 from Ben Riley to say it's about it's about how humans and groups respond to different rules. Some collective action problems actually require less aggressive responses to get more pro-social outcomes. And then $10 from Doobie to say, if what those people want is plausible deniability, why would they get tested and risk a misdemeanor? How does reducing punishment incentivize testing if testing opens them up to punishment versus none?
Because
And
the misdemeanor isn't
I'll let
so
you explain it, then
bad
we'll go
that they'd
close.
never get tested is the point, but they weren't getting tested when it was a felony, and that's just the results of this law. Like, you could look at the data before and after they passed this. So you reduce the spread of HIV, you increase the amount of people getting tested, and it wasn't just people who wanted to give it to people weren't getting tested, it was people who were scared that if they had it and they gave it to someone, that they would get accused of a felony, were scared of getting tested at all, because that was the only way for you to prove for sure that they did commit a felony. And it's just, yeah, it's... You just look at the results of it. It's like, yeah, it turns out this made less people have HIV, or fewer.
Okay. With that, we're going to go closing statements. Then we're going to let all these lovely individuals leave for the day. If you've enjoyed this program, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. It really helps that channel out, really helps me out, gets my growth going. We're almost at 9,000, and I would love to make the over 9,000 meme with my YouTube subs. That would be nice.
Yeah, guys, go
So
subscribe.
help
Wick
me
is
out with
criminally
that.
undersubscribed
What
for
do we
who he
got
hosts.
coming up?
It's kind of ridiculous.
Tomorrow, I'll probably be doing some call-ins. So if you have issues with anything I've said on this topic or others, if you have issues with how I do my business, you can call in and talk to me about it, and we'll have a discussion. On Friday, I'm still looking for people who want to challenge Loanerbox on your Reform UK, as well as the migrant crisis.
You're still looking because no one gives a shit about the UK. That's so funny.
I know. Look, it's a problem. And then maybe Sunday we'll do the Drew Pavlo and Erudite discussion, but who knows when that's gonna happen. With that said, okay, we're gonna start with Ant-Man and we're gonna end with Soy Pill, and that's the order we're
Yeah,
gonna
you
go
go
in.
subscribe to Wick so you know,
Ant-Man,
just in case you
close
didn't know
us
I
out.
was live,
Where
but
can
I'm on
people find
Wick,
you,
that you
and
know
what
to
are
go
your
to my
closing
chat.
thoughts?
But you still subscribe.
There's nowhere you can really find me. I don't do any sort of YouTube whatever this stuff is. I'm a complete Luddite for this stuff. I actually don't think, as far as the topic at hand, we are as far off as the show sounded. I think we probably agree on several things as far as criminal violence and
Thanks,
how to
Ben.
deal
I will
with
get a
that,
coffee. I appreciate you.
and mental health.
Also, funny that you know that a coffee is
understand we may
$10
be
in
far
California.
off on certain areas, but I think generally we probably agree more than we realize. I think the right and the left, if you want to frame it that way, or the Republican and the Democrats actually deal with crime very similarly. And that's about it.
Okay. Well, thank you for being here. I appreciate you. Sorry it went a little off the rails, but I hope you enjoyed it anyway.
That was a good time.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
Not so erudite, please.
Yeah, I'm not so erudite. I still think Republicans have no solutions, and by solutions, I mean interventions that actually lead to a better world and a better outcome. And despite me having my dog on stream most of the time, I have not zapped her once.
Fucking God. Every time.
Bravo.
Yeah.
Hooray! Okay. Thank you for being
Cheap
here.
points.
Really appreciate you. Blacktoid. Speaking of shocking. Okay. Go ahead.
Lactoid
Okay.
shocks his dogs for sure. I should say that. I'm sorry.
I don't have a dog, but if I did, I would. Hassan did nothing wrong. Okay, so I want to correct something that I said earlier. It was a response to a super chat. Somebody asked, "Is euthanasia a solution to cancer?" And I said it was a really bad one, and that was I jumped the gun on that one. I should have just said yes. I should have just said yes. That is a solution, and oftentimes for terminal cancer, it is in a lot of places the solution for cancer. In Canada, it is the solution for people who have terminal cancer. In a lot of U.S. states, it is the solution for people who have terminal cancer. It helps alleviate a lot of pain, and it helps them die with dignity, and it prevents a lot of negative effects that come with cancer. Chemotherapy can result in a lot of negative side effects, but it also is a solution to cancer. Radiation leads to a lot of negative side effects, but it also is a solution to cancer. I actually think this analogy is almost perfect. In order to treat this thing, there is going to be a cost. In order to treat cancer, there is going to be a cost. And depending on how far the cancer has progressed is going to dictate what kind of treatment that you have. And by how far the cancer has progressed is going to be a subjective determination by everybody. It's true that crime is not as big of a problem as it was in the 90s, but the crime in the 90s was insane. And the economy in the 90s was not as good as it is today, but that doesn't mean that people don't have an expectation for things to get better. And I don't think it's a problem for people to have an expectation for things to get better. I think it's fine when people want more economic growth, and I think it's fine when people want less crime. And most Americans do want less crime. And the Republicans have presented solutions to crime that are empirically backed, that reduce crime by measurable percentages. And most Americans are saying, yeah, at least more than the Democrats are saying, yeah, those solutions resonate more with me. That is the kind of country that I want to live in. And look, I think it's also somewhat of an unfalsifiable position if you simply define solution as, well, it's solving the problem, but it doesn't lead, like the side effects are too great for me to consider. The side effects, I just don't like them. No, you would just say then it's a bad solution. Things can be a solution, and in this case, these are a solution because they do actually impact crime. If you like what I had to say, you can find me at Lactoid TV on Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube.
Thank you for being here. Really appreciate you. Hope you come back. And last but certainly not least, the man we all need a solution for, soy pill.
What do you mean? What are you trying to say? Is it because of some sort of ethnicity that might be a part of it?
Because you're Jewish.
Look, we do ruin
Ant-Man
everything.
sent me that, by the way. Ant-Man messaged me and he was like, get this Jewish guy off.
Yeah, well, Ant-Man, you said we couldn't find you, but you already told us the state, so we'll find you eventually. Anyway, obviously I'm sympathetic to the idea that certain Democratic policies are soft on crime. Specifically, this, I think the theft one is like the closest thing I would say to that. But other than that, when you look at partisan things in these places, it doesn't matter who's mayor, it doesn't matter who's governor, it doesn't matter which things you're solving. It is a multifaceted, super complicated issue, and you can't just solve it with, well, we'll just make the criminal sentences longer. Oh, we'll just give a little more money to this thing. It requires a huge fucking overhaul of a bunch of different programs, of shifting money into healthcare, of reducing social deviancy through after school and all this other funding. It's super fucking complicated. I simply don't think it's so simple as, well, if we deter people and lock them up for longer, that's all we really need. It does work in very small cases for certain things that we have been too soft on, but unfortunately I don't think that's the case for everything. Otherwise, I think we're living in the fascist takeover of our lifetime, which is a lot more scary than any and all of the crime that is at an ultimate low point right now. So I think we need more healthcare, and that's the boring progressive solution. But this is a great debate. I thought this would be a lot crazier. Other than the whole Holocaust thing, I'd say it went pretty well, and you can quote me on that. Anyway,
other than the Holocaust,
other than the Holocaust,
Germany was
how was
cool
the
place,
40s?
right?
So yeah.
Okay. I can't do it anymore. We're gonna close out. I love you all, and I'll see you guys probably tomorrow. $5 from Old School to say, what are you gonna do when I send out my AI to commit crimes? Well, AI and criminality. We might get into that one day. But thank you again. Bye, everyone.
Bye, guys. All right, gang. Real quick, let's go through this. I want to see. I don't want to get too optimistic, but it looks like we might have an end to the suffering, and that's A-okay in my book. So let's bring up this article. Is my webcam on now? Webcam's not on. Give me a sec, guys. It always takes a little bit here. Come on. Okay, let me unplug it and plug it back in. Squatting makes you live longer, everyone. So if I squat to turn my camera on and off, I will live longer. Also, I just squat in the gym, but why am I grunting? Because I'm trying to turn on my camera, Josiah, and it's not working. I don't get it. Why does nothing ever work? There it is. Okay. I'm turning on my camera, Josiah. You can't get mad at me and imply all this weird stuff is happening, and then you let your co-host talk about my ass constantly. Oh, yeah, real quick. Bingo worthy. This debate was not bingo worthy. We got 8,000 messages, mentions of Shockgate, and then one Destiny. I don't think there really was a lot of bad faith. I think it was just talking past each other. I truly do think everyone was on board. And interruption, obviously, that's the freebie, and then completely off topic. So that's really only like 2 squares. I think that was probably as good as it's ever gonna get, except for maybe the Tali debate, not the Yelly one, but the gender debate. So Erudite, if anything, actually escalated that, but usually they're pretty tame. Sorry, you in contact with anyone in Gaza? No, I just know people who have a family there. So let's look at what happened. Israel and Hamas have agreed to pause fighting in Gaza. Okay, has it actually happened yet, or did they just agree to do it? Some hostages and prisoners in an agreement that was put forward by the Trump administration would represent the biggest breakthrough in months. Okay, this means that all the hostages will be released very soon. Israel will withdraw their troops to an agreed upon line. Hey, look, if Donald Trump can get this done, props to him. Credit where credit's due. What's the tweet? You got to hand it to Hitler. But obviously, yeah, like I'm going to support this regardless of who does it. With God's help, we will bring them all home, Hamas said. It had agreed to a deal that will lead to the end of the war, the withdrawal of Israeli troops, the entry of aid into Gaza, and the exchange of prisoners for hostages. Hamas called on Trump and the mediators to ensure that Israel implements all the provisions without disavowal or delay. I think it's like a 72-hour period. It is a 2-year war, isn't it? Why do you put 2-year war in quotes? Or just because it's not really a war? Hamas plans to release all 20 living hostages. People familiar with the matter told AP, while the Israeli military will begin a withdrawal from the majority of Gaza. While many questions remain, the sides appear to be closer. See, it hasn't happened yet, which is so annoying. It's like, yeah, they agreed to this, but is this going to break down in like 24 hours? Or is there going to be some instigator? It's like casually optimistic, but they have become in several months, ending a war, killed tens of thousands of Palestinians. The war sparked worldwide protests and brought... Okay, we don't need the background of the war. Everyone knows. Let's see. Trump expresses optimism. That doesn't help. Yet another hint of an emerging deal came later in the event when U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio passed to Trump a note on White House stationery that read, "You need to approve a Truth Social post soon so you can announce the deal." I fucking hate this country. Truth Social is the president's preferred social media platform. The note prompted Trump to proclaim, "We're very close to a deal in the Middle East." Great, thanks. The war began. Okay. Well, all right. Let's hope it happens, guys. I don't know. It's casually optimistic. Will it happen? Who can say? But, yeah. Tell me if this still exists in 48 hours. Yeah. Well, don't get this from me. The only reason you got this, if this is breaking news to you, the only reason you got it from me is because it was breaking news to me, right? But we're not reacting to breaking news for the regular, all right? Go read the news. Don't find out through me. Jesus Christ. Would you do a video on the history of Israel-Palestine? I read like 2 books on it, and I just feel like I know less than I did before. Actually, Kyla said she was going to make one. I looked at her script for a while. So I would, look out for that if she ever puts it out. I thought this was a few days ago. Well, they announced it a few days ago. Yeah, sorry, this isn't a full soy news segment, because after this, doing some stuff with my roommate. Gotta do some logistical stuff. Why does every Jews article in the war have to bother to say the backstory? Jews article? Why do you call it a Jews article? I'm just going to check what Gaza influencers say on Insta. Hey, that's a good way to stay informed, right? Yeah, I don't know about Shockgate, guys. I don't care about YouTube drama. I don't know what the fuck happened. I can't tell for sure. Maybe he shocked his dog. Maybe he didn't. It's funny because, like, I know people shock their dogs, and it's like, yeah, if you do it just like a little bit because they're unruly and you've tried everything else, especially I know a lot of millionaires who do it, and not because they're lazy, because they tried like the best personal trainers and it still didn't work. So they're like, all right, I'm resorting to like mild physical annoyance, but I don't know what he did. I don't know how bad it was. I don't know if he actually even did it or if it's a lie. It doesn't really matter. Is this what we're judging on? Like fucking Donald Trump said, we got to show 2 things. 2 more news things, guys. 2 more fucking news things, because who gives a fuck about Shockgate, guys? Donald Trump said we took freedom of speech away, everyone. All right? Let's bring this up on screen. And he said people are just going to keep fucking deflecting against this.
Burning mob, and we've made it 1-year penalty for inciting riots. We took the freedom of speech away because that's been through the courts, and the court said you have freedom of speech. But what has happened is when they burn a flag, it agitates and irritates crowds. I've never seen anything like it on both sides.
So they're almost trying to use like the, what was it, Ohio v... Oh, fuck, I forgot what the case was with the burning the cross, where it's like, well, burning the flag is inciting a riot now, which is fucking wild. But yeah, it's just, yep, we're taking away freedom of speech. Even if people are just expressing their distaste for the American government. It's fucking wild. Wait until they say, like, if you put your flag at half-mast or turn it upside down, that's a crime now, too. It's insane. But the other thing I do want to look at, which is kind of funny, I don't know if you guys know who Howard Lutnick is. He's the Secretary of Commerce right now, and also my former boss, and I can't go into that. But he had a very funny interview. Let me see. Where is this?
You're a New Yorker.
Okay, let me find the exact spot. I'm just going to control F massage. I'm sure it'll pop up. Come on. Yeah, here we go. Okay, we need to watch this because it's very funny with all the Epstein stuff. Just for background, Howard Lutnick, Secretary of Commerce, very rich man, total piece of shit, from my experience working under him, but that's all I can say. Because he bought our company. He wasn't like my boss that I saw every day or anything. I never interacted with the guy, but I know what his decisions were, and they're dumb fucking decisions. He's a rich guy, so he had interactions with Epstein. Okay, what is he saying about Epstein? Now, remember, the Epstein allegations, or the current Epstein narrative from Trump's team is Epstein only ever trafficked to himself. There's no client list. Donald Trump had nothing to do with it. They might even pardon Ghislaine Maxwell. That's it. There's no blackmail. There's no any of this crap. So what is the person in his cabinet saying about this? Let's make sure I'm at the right spot.
So how come Bill Gates and all these...
And so for business or for even philanthropy, if that guy was there, I wasn't going because he's gross.
So he's like, Epstein's gross, guys. I interacted with him and I didn't like it.
Look back at it as a gift.
Yes.
He gave me a gift.
Yes.
Of avoid. And so, yeah, that's my story. A one and absolutely done.
So I already skipped over this part, but essentially him and his wife were with Epstein. Epstein's like, hey, you want to go get a fucking massage? And he goes, oh, gross. No, this guy's a pervert. Never talks to him again. He says, this guy's gross. So how does he now explain other people?
Right. So I mean, that's an incredible story that you could pick up that he was a pervert.
It's gross. The guy's gross. Right with my wife. And like, he's gross. The guy's gross. This was not, the deep nuance of Howard Lutnick. This guy's gross.
Right. So he's just trying to be like, well, all these other people hanging out with him, who knows what they're doing. But you know me, I could see right through that bullshit. Now, that might be true, and he might just be talking himself up. But maybe he wasn't aware of, like, I don't know, what's been happening in the past year. The fact that Jeffrey Epstein was Donald Trump's alleged best friend, that, like, you know, Jeffrey Epstein has all these ties to the current administration. Like, maybe he's just not worried about that, or he's throwing them under the bus. I think he's just talking himself up, and he kind of forgets, but let's see.
So how come Bill Gates and all these other people could hang around him and not see what you saw?
Notice she didn't say Trump. I think she did that on purpose. I think she's being smart.
Or did they see it and ignore it? Or
no, they participated.
Right.
That's what they...
And then she gets him to say, yeah, no, those people, no, the blackmail, no, that's for sure true. Those people were absolutely doing that weird, creepy massage shit. 100% Bill Gates and all these people. And he keeps going.
His MO was, get a massage, get a massage. And what happened in that massage room, I assume was on video. This guy was the greatest blackmailer ever.
So he is fully contradicting his own admin, his own boss. It's definitely blackmail. All those people are on video, but he hasn't thought Trump yet. And I think he's going to realize.
Blackmailed people. That's how he had money. So
what happened to those videos? Why is there now such a dearth of information when, Donald Trump's people are running the FBI and the DOJ?
I assume way back when they traded those videos in exchange for him getting that 18-month sentence, which allowed him to have visits.
Still doesn't realize she mentioned Donald Trump.
Out of jail. I mean, he's a serial sex offender. How could he get 18 months and be able to go to his office during the day and have visitors and stuff? It must have been a trade. So my assumption, I have no knowledge, but my assumption is there was a trade for the videos because there were people on those videos.
And have you talked to Donald Trump about this and shared your...
All right, now she's really pressing him. Okay, hey, Donald Trump. Remember Donald Trump, the president, the guy who hired you, the guy who has all these allegations on him, the guy who won't release the Epstein files? Do you remember this guy, Donald Trump? Do you know this guy? Have you heard of this guy?
Theory?
No, I mean, he knows the story.
Right.
But my story, that...
it's not a story. I mean, I just saw him once.
He knows that story, but...
he knows
He would have been interested in that story.
Yeah, but I don't know. It's a story. It's just a one and done. That guy. Ugh.
And did Trump feel the same way about it?
It's just a story. I mean, what does he care about it? He just hung out with this guy constantly. We just have all these videos of him together. But no. I mean, this is just my story. Who cares? This is 5 minutes into his fucking story that he's clearly very proud of. Until all of a sudden, Wait a minute. Uh-oh.
I don't speak to him about these kind of.
I don't talk to Donald Trump about Epstein.
Are just distractions.
They're just
No, the
distractions.
thing about-
He's the greatest blackmailer in the history. He had all this money. He made a deal with the FBI, but this is just a distraction, guys.
The president is. I'm doing the most important.
Whoa, hold on. I have to glaze Trump now.
These are just distractions.
Right.
The thing about the president is I'm doing the most important thing that I see. And then right after we do that, he does 10 other things that are.
And then he's going to the full deep throat, the dictator, like, the president, he does one thing and then 10 more good things. I can't imagine him ever doing anything wrong. He's done nothing wrong. He's perfect. He's so cool, handsome, large. He's the largest president, bigger than Taft, bigger than Lincoln.
As, if not more important, that are not my thing.
Right.
And you're like, wow.
Wow.
And he is great at it. And sometimes he lets me stay. So like he lets me stay for the Joint Chiefs of Staff come in.
Right.
Like, this is like
Totally moved off the Epstein thing, by the way. Now he's like, this guy's great. And he lets me hang out. He lets me stay after playdates to watch movies.
coolest thing ever.
Tell us a little bit about how you got into this bizarre role, really. You're a billionaire.
Yeah, and then totally moved off. So I thought that was fucking hilarious. Like, he realized how fucked up how fucked up it was. He totally dropped the ball. And apparently, this was a little while ago. This did air 4 days ago, but apparently he has not been in like the public eye for a while, so they might have been chastising him. Who knows if he's going to be forced out? But the guy's a total piece of shit. And I say that not just because he's in the Trump admin doing dumb stuff with tariffs and making bad economic policy, but as the former underling of said CEO of a company I worked for, total fucking moron, selfish, fuck people over, just did horrible stuff, but can't get into specifics without getting sued. Probably. So maybe one day when it breaks, that NDA, that pesky little NDA. Anyway, guys, that's the important news from today, which is we might actually have a ceasefire, which would be great. Hopefully it stays. I hope you enjoyed this little talk. I think I'm doing an interview with someone from Unfuck. Her name's Amy. I forgot her last name. But she's like a big influencer with like, it's so funny. Her demographics are like older millennial women, and my demographics are older Gen X women, and I'm younger millennial and Zoomer men. So like the crossover of audiences is like zero. So it'll be very fun to be on that podcast and see like, can we even relate? What's a rotary phone? Did you destroy that 8-year-old in the TPUS tweet in a debate yet? Well, she hasn't challenged me. She's too scared. She ran. I think the plenary power interview was a funny moment. Oh, did I not? I guess I just tweeted about that. We should watch that real quick, actually. So for those of you who don't know, plenary power is like, unchecked. I can do whatever I want. I have ultimate unilateral authority. And sorry for the quality on this. I don't know why it's so bad, but like...
You've called
really
the
quiet.
district judge's ruling blocking the deployment of National Guard in Oregon legal insurrection. Does the administration still plan to abide by that ruling?
Well, the administration filed an appeal this morning with the Ninth Circuit. I would note the administration won an identical case in the Ninth Circuit just a few months ago with respect to the federalizing of the California National Guard. Under Title 10 of the U.S. Code, the president has plenary authority.
Okay. Now, I want to be clear here. First of all, they got rid of this clip. They didn't even air it on their own channel. And this is not AI. You can look at the transcripts. It's on their official website. But he says this, and okay, so you fucked up, and you accidentally revealed that actually I'm going to start using the line that Donald Trump's allowed to do whatever the fuck he wants because he's a king a little too early, because there's some legal loop you have to jump through first. Well, do you say that it's breaking up? Do you, walk off? Do you say the teleprompter's not working, which doesn't make sense because you're responding to a question? What if you just pretend to be frozen until someone cuts, or I guess the guy who's filming him gets the hint and says, turn off the fucking camera? Because look at him, totally moving this entire time. He's not frozen.
The president has plenary authority.
Stephen?
Blinking,
Stephen?
moving back and forth.
Hey, Stephen,
Blinking.
can you hear me?
Shut off the camera. turn away, cut away.
Stephen, I
All right,
apologize. It
cool.
seems
And then
like
they
we're
bring him
having
back
a
later, and he
technical
doesn't
issue.
mention plenary again. Anyway, that's fucking terrifying.